Anderson takes off. And the freshman gets the corner. It's a foot race. Knocked out at the 1. Now you see the talents.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
Toafili in motion. Got a man down the sidelines. It's him, Toafili, and he is off. One man to beat, cuts it back, and brought down to the 20-yard line by Sheridan Jones. They're going to say touchdown. He landed on somebody. Toafili with a magic act, and they're calling it a touchdown.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Here's Edwards with a lay. Donovan Edwards down the sideline. Gets past Ransom. Donovan Edwards. Touchdown, Michigan. The Don.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Looking for an option to the end zone. He goes. Touchdown, Canes. Jacoby George.
Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Search 365 Sports on YouTube. Brought to you by TFNB, your bank for life.
This time in the shotgun. Play fake. Aller to the end zone. Touchdown. Penn State. Khalil Dinkins.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
They're going to go Wildcat and snap it directly to Mamba. He tries the right-hand side. He finds Painter. That's a Clemson touchdown.
Now here's David Smoke and Craig Smoke.
All right, here we go on this Friday afternoon. Paul is out. He'll be back on Tuesday in the studio. Right here on the corner of MLK and Elm is Craig Smoke to my right. Hello, Craig. Good afternoon. And Garrett Ross also running the mothership. Emery is going to be, as he always does, dicing up and editing and making everything look great for 365 Sports tonight at 10:30 on the local CW. So even though I am not someone that's big into legalese, even though it seems like it's taken forever, the House versus NCAA settlement filed today, which when you really break it down, there's a lot of things that matter. One, revenue sharing, rosters or at least scholarships, baseball from 11.7 to as many as in the lower 30s when it comes to baseball scholarships. And so NCAA and power conferences have filed the agreement on the settlement that is going to cost a lot of people a lot of money. Even if you're Houston Baptist who tried to fight it and they were told, listen, you could have gone somewhere else and not been a part of the NCAA. But really, are there any other options if you're not a part of the NCAA? 10-year deal, trying to pay back players because they were pushed back with NIL and much more. Craig Smoke, I know it's complicated. Amanda Christovich, who's great at breaking down legal type stories for us, will join us in about 25 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is all good. I really do not care for the legal part of, the broader conversation, but I understand why it's important. I think we got overran with it during the offseason for a couple months there, to the point we kind of had to push back and pull away from it because it just became too tedious to talk about. So I'm all for talking about it when it actually is where it's supposed to be, which is getting filed and getting pushed through and then getting, put into place. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other talk about this. I saw, like, a report every day of, like, no, it's coming this week or it's coming, it's coming. And there's a delay here and a delay there and a delay here and a delay there. And I know our political system's got a lot going on right now. But, yeah, I mean, this is good for now. I don't know if it's good for – beyond the length of this agreement. There's a lot that will take place between now and then and a lot of unanswered questions. I don't know that Amanda's going to be able to answer everything herself or that anybody really has the answers to what ultimately this all looks like years down the road. But for right now, it seems like a compromise that needed to be made, an agreement that needed to be reached to try and calm the waters as best as possible. So, yeah, I've enjoyed not really getting into the courtrooms for a while, even though we've talked about, the ongoing ACC situation. But that's different. That's interesting because that's like, hey, conferences could explode and cause, movement elsewhere. And so that's kind of fun. This is fun if you're an athlete, for sure.
Absolutely.
But I think as far as like a talking thing, long overdue, and I'm glad that we're actually, not talking about something getting done, but it's actually getting filed today. So, that's great.
All right, Ross Dellinger put this up. Painting the scene for an historic day. NCAA and power conferences filing, that's later today, this was some 7 hours ago, the long-form agreement and their settlement. The 10-year deal ushers in athletes' revenue sharing, abolishes scholarship limits, and creates arbitration for enforcement disputes. Implementation will be for the 25 and 26 school year.
Yeah,
what not to expect? Go ahead.
I don't want to, say that this is the answer, the end-all, be-all to everything, but right. I do think for right now, this has put a kibosh on the whole super conference breakaway, all of that. It hasn't stopped realignment discussions, but I do think the fear of like, hey, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to run off and leave everybody else behind. This helps to stem that off for the next few years, I believe. And I also think, though, however, like I say with most things that happen in college sports, if you're anybody who's not directly in line to benefit, take a deep sigh of, or take a deep breath and kind of enjoy this moment that you got to this finish line.
Yep.
But you better already have your head on a swivel for what's about to come down the pipeline, years from now.
Well, including everybody's going to pay the NCAA. Everybody a part of the NCAA is going to pay back to the back pay for athletes in this $1 billion settlement. What not to expect? Guidance on how Title IX applies to the method of which schools choose to distribute revenue to athletes, anything truly groundbreaking, and the long form is only expected to provide specific around previously reported concepts. Separately, plaintiff attorneys will file a document outlining their distribution method for $2.8 billion in back damages to ex-athletes over a 10-year period. Their formula, possibly 75% to football players, may serve as a guide. And what you can do here pretty soon, once this is completely finished and at least official, schools can go online. For example, let's say you're Tulsa, and you can see the number you're going to have to pay because of the money that everyone's going to have to pitch in at certain points. Schools will be permitted, not required, though, to offer scholarships up to the new roster limits. So even if baseball can go to 34, you don't have to go to 34. You can stay where you are. You can do 20. You can do 33. But that's also something. It's not like they're shoving that where you have to reach that number, just like the options are there, Craig, with the revenue sharing in that $21 or $22 million range.
Yeah, that point we've talked about quite a bit of, the extra scholarships in various sports, including football. And I don't know what to think of that on the other side of it. I don't know how that changes things big picture. I don't know if that's bad news if you're a school that's not, Ohio State rich, or if that's great news because, you can pay more baseball players, and that's a good thing regardless of how competitive the field might be and how pricey that might get. So, it all sounds good like everything else, like every single decision basically that's been made over the last 2 years, it benefits the athletes. So, good for them. Again, a lot of this long overdue. A lot of this could have been avoided entirely if a bunch of old rich people had not been so greedy for so many decades. You wouldn't have ever even have reached this point. But now the dam burst, and it's nobody's fault but the ones that constructed the dam in the first place. So they're soaking wet now, and it's about time. And so it's great for the athletes. The scholarship thing in particular, I'm interested to hear more. Like, I know that Levi did an interview with I think I don't know if it was actually Mitch Thompson.
Mitch Thompson.
Okay,
yeah.
It was Mitch Thompson specifically, Baylor's baseball coach, and he seemed to be excited about the news, the number of extra scholarships in baseball. I'm sure all of those coaches are excited about that, but competitively, I don't know what that does when you get to a point where Georgia can have 100 scholarship athletes or 105 and you're still paying 85. Like, how much of a difference does that make? Or guys just rotting away on the bench? Like, those are the things I'm not sure about and I'm far more interested in because that's, more directed onto the field. But, yeah, that's huge. The scholarship lack of limits or the raise of limits is absolutely massive. And one of the more interesting points of this entire ordeal, that and obviously the athletes finally getting theirs, although that does have the caveat of having to be within a certain time frame. So that's got to be pretty damn annoying if you're somebody who was like a year outside of that settlement period, and which concludes the majority of college athletes because it's only, the past however many years it was. I forget the exact number that we talked about. 10, the last 10 years specifically. So if you're outside of that sucks. But for those inside of it, yeah, it's a banner day for sure.
All right, so again, football, which is 85 now, will be 105, at least the option to 105. Men's basketball, women's basketball, 15. That's up a couple. Baseball's 11.7 will be 34 or can be. Softball, 25. Volleyball, 18. Schools can offer scholarships to full rosters, not for this season, not for 24-25, but for 25 and 26. We'll let Amanda break all that down, Christovich, break that down for us here in about 15 minutes or so. Georgia, with yet another story. Ra Thomas, pretty darn good player. In fact, a really good player, has been arrested on battery, cruelty to children charges. It just came, like when I saw that, I'm like, okay, he was speeding 105 or whatever. And even then that would be just, okay, we've discussed enough is enough. This is not good. Not sure what his future is, if at all, with Georgia. He's a really good player, but they continue to have just one thing after another. And it's at the point now where you'll start to see numerous columns written. You'll start to see my Georgia administration has got to get involved. Georgia athletic director's got to get involved. Kirby Smart said he's been involved, but this is yet another not good story when it comes to Georgia football.
Yeah, and I don't know how much I care. I almost want to just sit back and let it unfold the way it's going to because Kirby Smart doesn't care, right? So why should I or why should anybody else, right? Why should we care? He doesn't even care. No, I think he cares to some extent, but it rings a little hollow. I really don't think they care as much as even has been portrayed, which seems to be very little. And I think it's going to take somebody like something. I'd say it's going to take something tragic happening. Something tragic already happened.
They've already had that.
And there's been multiple things since then. Now, they're not all intertwined. Like a guy drunk driving is not necessarily directly related, or a guy speeding in his Charger is not directly related, although similar actions to what created the massive tragedy from not that long ago. But, yeah, this is an entirely different thing. It does, lend credence to the whole, narrative of the program's out of control. If you're, a Florida fan or an Alabama fan or those who want to portray it that way, there's certainly a lot of incidents that you cannot deny, no matter how you want to try and spin it as a Georgia fan or whatever. There's been a whole lot of noise and a whole lot of police interactions ongoing. This, is a situation where you've got a guy who just came over from Mississippi State. So he hasn't even, had a cup of coffee with Georgia, but, really big picture-wise, he's been there a pretty short amount of time, but was arrested in January 2023 by Georgia police. So, right when he, first got there last year, and accused of felony false imprisonment because he confined and detained a person, allegedly, without legal authority because he stood in front of the dorm room door, blocked the exit, and told the woman that she could not leave. He was also accused of misdemeanor battery because he intentionally caused visible bodily harm by causing bruising to the right biceps and bruising and abrasions to a woman's shins. All those charges were dropped back in March of that year. He played 8 games last year and, did fine, but with some time with injury. He didn't have, massive stats, 23 for 383 and a touchdown. But, yeah, it's definitely somebody who you were thinking a lot about when it comes to this season, and now it remains to be seen what his punishment will be. But that's a lot of legal activity for less than 2 years, of being on campus. And so I don't know if that's the way that Ra Thomas is or if it's, a crazy girl on the other side of the allegations. But, man, when you have a program where so many things have seemingly have been ongoing, it's like, yeah, man, what the hell is going on in Athens, Georgia?
We've seen this. I said this is many years ago. many, many years ago that it seemed like it's hard, and Garrett and Craig, you guys can give me your feedback. I hope you do, that it seemed like it's hard to compete at the highest level to win a national championship in football without numerous legal issues that follow right after that or are during that time. Doesn't mean if you're 6-6, 7-6, you don't have them either, but it just seemed like there's a certain edge of some players you have to be able to compete at that specific level.
I think for me on that situation, yes, but at the same time, like if you look at Nick Saban and what happened to Alabama, like I think you could make a case that during Nick Saban's entire tenure as the football coach at Alabama, he kept a cleaner house per se than what like Nate Oates has done in his time there. So I think there's weird in certain scenarios where different coaches and staffs do a better job of it. But at the same time, like you can't continually have this go on. And we've seen this happen multiple times. Like LSU has these type of issues all the time, and it's something that needs to be addressed. But I think it kind of varies from program to program personally.
Yeah, I don't think that you have to have the guys. I mean, this guy right here, we're talking about, I don't think you need somebody with 3 counts of cruelty to children in the second degree and 3 counts of battery. And I just listed off 2 more incidents where he's apparently holding a woman against her will or beating on her. I don't think you need that kind of edge. I think there is an element of, having an edge, and yeah, you can correlate teams having success with guys getting in trouble, but I don't think there's anything scientific behind that. I think that, there's probably deep down some correlation you can make, I suppose, but I don't think that's something like I necessarily buy into or believe that's a must to go and win national championships. But there is seemingly a common thread there, although a guy getting arrested for having a little bit of weed is a lot different than a guy being a part of somebody being killed or somebody being beaten or held against their will. So yeah, you don't need that much edge to go and win national titles. I don't have any. I have some examples. I don't have 25 years worth of examples. It seems to me that is a trend. It doesn't mean every year, but it seems to me that it's a trend, and maybe it's more like every 5 or 7, 8 years than it is constantly. But I do think that there's an edge you have to be able to play at that level, at that specific level, and we'll see what Georgia might do. Arizona, welcome to the Big 12. It's not official, I think, until August the 1st, but look at their field. They have now laid down the Big 12 logos on the field in between the 20 and 30-yard lines on either side. Congratulations, Arizona, and all the new schools that come in will be doing that. And plus, I'm sure on their uniforms, but there we are with Arizona, the Wildcats, and their football field in Tucson. Cincinnati, and initially when I saw this, I'm like, oh, damn, I didn't know they were playing Miami, Florida. Cincinnati and Miami, Ohio, the football series coming to an end. Miami forced the issue by canceling trips to Nippert in 25 and 28. Cincinnati then decided to do the same with trips to Oxford in 27 and 29. I've seen Chad go back and forth with Miami, Ohio fans, etc., but that series, that's too bad. Both of them in Ohio, that series is coming to an end. Yeah, I mean, not sure about the reasoning behind that. I'm not well-versed in Cincinnati and Miami of Ohio history. Need to not sarcasm at all. Probably, brush up on that, or maybe not, since it's coming to an end anyways. But I do feel like I'm constantly still trying to learn a little bit about Cincinnati and these other programs. I mean, for goodness sakes, in the last year alone, there's been 8 new schools that we've all had to learn a bit about and are continuing to learn about just in the Big 12 alone, much less all the other movements around each league. So, yeah, I don't know what precipitated this, but I'm sure some of the banter filled in the blanks. And I guess if you were somebody who enjoyed this, and obviously there's that Ohio regional rivalry element, then yeah, maybe it sucks that it's going away, or maybe it's for the best. I don't really know. But
they started the series in 1888.
Well, then, yeah, that's a long time.
Well over 100 times they've played.
You hate to see that. There's been a lot of 100-year type rivalries that have broken, or have now, reignited due to conference realignment. Those are some of the ramifications of moving conferences, especially going across the country in some cases. So, yeah, wasn't aware of that. Like I said, need to brush up more on the Cincinnati rivalry history, but sounds like a bummer if you're letting go that much history, but also sounds like both sides are pretty ready to let it go based on the responses. So
Miami won last year, 31-24. It's 55 wins for Cincinnati, 54 wins for Miami, Ohio, and 4 ties. and goes back again, back into the 1880s when that series began. How about UCF? We've discussed the recruiting. Gus Malzahn, year 2 of the Big 12. Today, Jamarian Gordon, cornerback who was committed to Alabama, has flipped to UCF. Good win here. Head up with the cornerback from Jackson, Alabama, has been committed to Crimson Tide since May. Quote, when I go first round out of UCF, my legacy will live forever. So a nice pickup with recruiting and UCF. And not sure there's still, 4 months before signing day in December.
August, September, October, November. It's a little over 4 months, about 5 months. But, yeah, close enough. It just seems like that sounded way too soon, but I guess it's not that far off, actually. But, yeah, there's still a long ways to go and locking down this class, but that seems like absolutely massive for UCF. I mean, to be able to say you flipped a guy from Alabama, I don't know, the details behind his whole recruitment, but to see them, be able to pull a move like that and add another 4-star to a class that's already got not quite a handful, but getting close to a handful of 4-star guys. That's awesome for UCF. And right now they got the number 2 class in the Big 12 for 2025, which you seem to think, or at least I a moment ago seemed to think still had a really long way to go. But no, it's got about 4-5 months left to go. So I think most classes are pretty well 75% or so locked in now at this point. That can vary depending on what school you're looking at. But, yeah, we're about to hit that stretch run where football takes precedent and you're trying to keep it all together or finish it off over the course of the football season as well. So they can go and have a good season and keep drumming up the energy and the momentum and, throwing all their weight behind being in a power conference and having this opportunity and having their resources together and being able to fully flex their muscles. I mean, there's a lot of people that believe UCF is one of those schools that could stand to benefit really greatly from the moves. And I think last year was a little bit of a, wading into the water and kind of figuring things out. And they seem to have recruiting really rolling and a lot of great transfers. And I think if they have some success on the football field, we could really see this thing take it off to another level. But, yeah, that's massive recruiting news for the Knights.
And then this story we'll get to later on Southwest Airlines changing their philosophy or their policy. We'll get to that later as just an offbeat story about their when you just get on board, you find your own seat. That was interesting and how a lot of people reacted to that. But coming up, Amanda Christovich, Front Office Sports, on the settlement between the House and the NCAA, her take on it. What are some things that maybe we don't quite understand that will be a part of it or might even still, because I remember there was a time when they said, okay, this ends all the lawsuits. Forget that. There's already 1 or 2 that have been filed since all this first became a story. This is 365 Sports.
It's the heat of summer, but the real heat is what you're cooking on the grill, smoker, or oven. Waco Custom Marketplace can be your go-to playmaker for summertime grilling. You can't go out and eat? Be your own chef. Custom ordered, cut ribeyes, sirloins, fillets, New York strips. Focus on high-quality beef at a competitive price. Waco Custom Marketplace has fresh deli cuts with sliced turkey, ham, pepperoni, or corned beef. Fresh seafood, salmon, shrimp, mahi-mahi, live lobsters, and great priced chicken products, whole birds, tenders, chicken breast, and wings. Smoked items unique to Waco, house-made bacon, summer sausage, boudin, hot links, and German sausage. Every seasoning for every meal or occasion, grilling, baking, or frying. Your hometown grocery store with canned goods, pastas, fresh baked bread, buns and chips, sauce, condiments to pickles, charcoal, and lighter fluid, cold beer and wine. The best kolaches in Waco, mouth-watering cinnamon rolls, here for you in the community, helping avoid the long lines and crowded stores. Serving quality local products to the Waco community and beyond. Go online for more of the weekly values on their Facebook page. Waco Custom Marketplace, 425 Lake Erie Drive in Waco, or WacoCustomMarketplace.com.
Make this the summer of Ram at Allen Samuels in Waco. Drive home in a 2025 Ram 1500 Lone Star for just 2.9% for 72 months, with no payments for 90 days. Plus, first responders get an extra $500 off at Allen Samuels.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one. Commercial, farm and ranch, or residential, Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm. Welcome home.
Parenting is full of surprises.
You never know what to expect.
So after our son was born, I called my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent to set up a life insurance policy in case something happened to me.
Sawyer is now 2.
And we'll soon have a sister. There's no one else I would trust with protecting my family.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Baylor alumni are more than 160,000 strong. When we all join hands to support our university, we don't just move the needle, we move mountains. Working together, we create life-changing opportunities for students on the field, in the classroom, in the laboratory, and in life for generations to come. So get connected, get involved. Learn how at baylor.edu/alumni.
Let the journey to financial brilliance begin with Genco's limited time offers. Max your earnings with a Kasasa cash account and get paid monthly with a 4.25 APY. That's $425 annually. Then invest in a 13-month share certificate and earn 4.9 APY. That's $529. Earn cash and outshine the rest. At Genco, we offer you the sun and the moon. Kasasa based on average daily balance of $10,000. Certificate based on $10,000 investment. See GencoFCU.org for details. NCUA.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
Amanda Christovich has joined this show a handful of times, and glad we got to know what she does. Appreciate her insight. Sports business reporter, college sports, front office sports. She joins us on 365 Sports. Craig Smoke, I'm David Smoke. Amanda, thanks for your time. So the settlement being filed, we've heard a lot the last several weeks about what it might mean. In your opinion, what are the 2 or 3 biggest bullet points about what this means going forward?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me. I think the big headline, as we all know, right, is that today, the formal documents with the sort of nuts and bolts of the settlement proposal are going to be submitted to the court. And of course, the glitziest, part of that is that athletes would theoretically be able to share revenue with their university for the first time as part of this agreement. Obviously, that's thing number one. I think the second most important thing about the settlement is that there is going to be a $2.8 billion back damages price tag for athletes going back several years who weren't able to participate in NIL before that it changed in 2021. And that's not just significant because of the number. It's significant because there are a lot of non-power conference schools that are going to be affected by this, even though the lawsuit doesn't name them as defendants, because part of the way that those damages are going to be paid is that everyone in Division I is going to have reduced revenue distributions from the NCAA. So there are a lot of schools that are not happy at all about the settlement. And then I think thing number 3 is what the settlement does not address, which is the employment question. And there's been a lot of conversation about how this settlement could, make everybody happy and provide a happy medium. The players aren't employees, but everyone's going to get, well, not everybody, but the players who generate the most money are going to get paid for the first time, et cetera, et cetera. But, ultimately the employment question is the biggest one looming over college sports, and this settlement isn't going to touch it at all.
So, Amanda, what will bring about the continuation of the employment conversation? I guess this provides a safe haven of sorts for a few years. Would that be fair to say? Or is this, what does this ultimately do outside of just allowing the schools to be more involved when it comes to what does it do in terms of the legal repercussions? Yeah,
what's funny is I think this settlement, here are two different ways that it could play out in terms of the employment question, right? The NCAA is planning to take the settlement if and when it is finalized, which, by the way, today is just one step in sort of like a prolonged process where there's going to be, opportunities for objections and the judge has to approve it, et cetera, et cetera. So if and when it is finalized, the NCAA wants to take the settlement to Congress and say, hey, Congress, look at how much we've changed. Look at how many concessions we've made for the athletes. Why don't you take this settlement and make it into a law? And, oh, by the way, slip in there somewhere that we won't have to make any other changes, that the athletes are not employees. And, look, we've agreed to pay the ones who generate the most money some amount of the broadcast television revenue, but why don't we just stop there? That's what the NCAA is hoping is going to happen. Conversely, on the other hand, however, what I think might happen is that this settlement is going to be used as evidence in multiple cases, one at sort of the federal court level and two at the National Labor Relations Board. I think they're going to use the settlement as evidence to say, hey, this is the NCAA saying in court that they're agreeing for schools to pay players. And athletes, participating with the expectation of compensation, that's employment. So, I think that in a weird way, it could almost backfire and make these employment arguments even stronger in the cases that are going to be continuing regardless of the House settlement.
That would be so NCAA. that would just be the perfect NCAA way to go about with all this.
Amanda, Craig, you're exactly right. The players now who get NIL, and there's a bunch of them, how many of, let's say, the 100% play, how many of them do you think are filing taxes?
Ooh, that's a good question. Not 100%, that's for sure.
And if they become employees, won't they then start having money taken out of their whatever check that might be?
Well, that's an interesting question because the NIL money would not really have anything to do with the employment with the salaries, right? Because it would be considered like your third-party sponsorship dollars. The question is, how are these salaries going to be classified? Because the NCAA says, well, if the athletes become employees, then they're going to have to pay taxes on their scholarship money. Actually, several years ago, the IRS wrote a memo on this and said that unless the NCAA schools change the classification of a scholarship, a scholarship's still a scholarship, right? Like you have athletes or non-athlete students who do work study, for example, right? They're not taxed on their scholarship. They're just taxed on the money they make on the side. So if the NCAA and the schools decide to convert scholarships into salaries, then the players are going to be taxed on them. If they choose not to do that and start paying extra money on top of the scholarship, that's a way to, save the players a lot of money. As usual, the NCAA is threatening, a doomsday scenario that it has the opportunity to prevent. It's up to the schools and the NCAA whether they want to reclassify scholarships if players have to be employees. And that would be bad for the players. It would be anti-player. They're acting as if they wouldn't have a choice. The IRS says they would have a choice.
Amanda Christovich, Front Office Sports with us on 365 Sports.
Amanda, any idea of, the Title IX ramifications here?
Yeah, that's the other big question, right? And that's the reason why the settlement is not going to dictate which athletes should be paid what amount of money of this annual revenue share of these, roughly $22 million a year that each school can pay their players. Honestly, all of the Title IX lawyers have conflicting opinions about whether or not Title IX means the athletes all need to be paid, the men and the women need to be paid the same amount or not, whether or not there's just sort of like an opportunity of payment that needs to be the same. The Department of Education has not weighed in on this yet, and that's what everyone's really waiting for. So it's either going to be that or like another lawsuit where, let's say there's a school that says, you know what, we're going to pay our football players 75% of the revenue, even though they're only 50% of the athletes. There could be women's sports athletes who go to court over that, and there's a decision there. Like, honestly, nobody really knows. And again, it's because the Department of Education, granted, they have a lot going on, but they've not weighed in on this. And it would be helpful for all of us if they would.
Yeah, no question. And so yet, even though it's been filed, it's not official because there's still a lot of back and forth to go. But how would you describe the day that it's actually even been filed as far as when it comes to Congress and or when it comes to college athletics?
Yeah, I mean, look, so technically we're still waiting for all of these documents to come in. They're supposed to come in like 25 minutes-ish because, of course, God forbid you file documents first thing in the morning so everybody can enjoy their weekend, right?
Right. Yeah.
We're waiting for the documents to come in. I think that Congress obviously is busy with other things right now. I think that they are going to take a look at this settlement. I'm sure there will be like statements, from the sort of usual political players who speak out about whether or not they think this settlement is a good deal. But ultimately, I actually don't expect, like, even if the agreement is finalized in the next few months, I don't expect Congress to really weigh in until January.
And so another 6 months of speculation and much more.
Yes.
So this is basically a hurdle they're jumping over, but it's not the finish line by any stretch, is what you're saying.
No, but what's so exciting for us college sports business nerds is that because these documents, it's obviously a major step in the process, but like for us, the documents are public once they're filed with the court. So we're going to be able to see all these nitty-gritty details of, there are other things that, are maybe not making the big headlines, but, new roster limits because there are no scholarship limits anymore. There's supposed to be some sort of enforcement mechanism. Who knows what else might be in there. We're all going to get to read it. Whereas for the last couple months, at least on the record, administrators and lawyers have been relatively tight-lipped about what's in this settlement specifically outside of like the major highlights that we already talked about. So like we'll really get to see what a lot of this is going to look like for the first time.
I got a question for you on Houston Baptist. They filed, as you know, they filed a lawsuit saying that they should not be included in all of this, and they were turned down. The judge said that they decided to join the NCAA. They have to eat whatever they're going to have to pay. But he also made a comment that they had other options. What other options would Houston Baptist have had if they're under the umbrella? That's really the only umbrella when it comes to college athletics.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess like legally the argument is you could join the NAIA instead of the NCAA if you don't want to pay this money. I mean, look, I think that there are arguments for and against whether the non-power conference schools should have to contribute or have their distributions lowered as a result of this lawsuit, because they're all making money off of the backs of players who aren't getting paid. It just depends on how much money that is, right? Especially in Division I, when they all get distributions from the men's basketball television contract. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's a good point. What other choice do they have? They clearly were, I was told by sources, and this is not news, but none of the non-power conferences or schools, for that matter, in Division I were consulted on the settlement. They weren't even told what was going to be in the settlement until it got leaked to the media. I mean, you know, you had like Big East schools learned about what the terms of the settlement were going to be, or the broad strokes, the same time we did, which is pretty remarkable considering there was a meeting where Charlie Baker was supposed to explain to the D1 membership what it entailed, but he kept it all very close to the vest. So I understand the frustration, but at the same time, and again, this wasn't really the judge's argument, just speaking and looking at the way that the money is distributed, like all these Division I programs are benefiting from a system where the players aren't getting paid. So, you know, they're all going to have to chip in. And ironically enough, some of them might be paying more money than they would have if they had just agreed to do employment in the first place.
So a major part of the money that the NCAA gets from like the college football playoff, the NCAA men's tournament, yeah, it does go to a lot of the conferences, especially men's basketball. But most of that money is going to the Power 5 or Autonomy 4 conferences, with Notre Dame included as well. And yet, when it comes to paying this back, everybody's going to pay basically what appears to be the same percentage?
Not the same percentage, but and again, that's something that I'm going to see, because I could tell you like the 60-40 split of the $2.8 million between the power conferences and then the rest of the conferences, but that will be hopefully in the documents of like how many millions of dollars each conference is going to expect to lose, or, you know, to just not receive that they would normally receive. It's definitely not the same. Like the power conferences are paying much more than everybody else, conference by conference. But I believe in aggregate, and again, maybe it's not even worth me saying because this will come out in the document. But if I remember correctly, like in aggregate, yeah, like all the other conferences are going to be paying, you know, pretty close to what the power conferences are. And again, that's because, you know, it's like the NCAA, what is the NCAA's money? It's money that ends up going to the schools anyway, right? So when the NCAA has to pay any settlement, it's money that comes out of the membership's pocket.
All right, one more thing on scholarships being increased from 11.7, example, in baseball to up to 34, 85 in football, up to 105. And then, of course, the possibility of revenue sharing that could be, I think that high figure was around $22 million. Is that the cap that schools can go to? But does that mean you could stop at $5 million with revenue sharing, or you can still just do 18 scholarships rather than 34?
I believe that I know for a fact that when it comes to the revenue sharing, you don't have to revenue share anything. This is just what up to $22 million is what you would be allowed to revenue share. Okay. If you can't afford it, if you don't want to, that's fine. Obviously, if you're a power conference school, you're not going to be able to recruit if you're not paying the players and everybody else is, right? So that's where the incentive is.
Right.
But yeah, you can pay $5 million, $10 million. You could pay $21.9 million. You know, and the $22 million, by the way, it's a percentage of annual athletic department revenue. So that number is going to fluctuate between like 20 and 25 every year. But the 22 is the number that everyone's kind of using just in general. So just keep that in mind that will fluctuate a little bit. As for the scholarship limits, yes, again, I believe it's the same where you don't have to offer a scholarship to every single player on your roster. But I did want to point out, because we're literally in the middle of the Olympic ceremony, that it was brought to my attention by an Olympic sports coach that for a lot of Olympic sports, the roster increase and the scholarship limits being listed is going to be really good for them, because they're going to be able to grow their sports by offering athletes the economic opportunity to have a scholarship in a sport where they may not have been able to before, like beach volleyball, for example, that you still, So I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting and like a positive spin on the roster situation that I haven't really heard much of before.
Especially in light of all I've heard is the Olympic sports are going to die off in this new era.
That's right.
I feel like that's
well,
all.
Stay tuned. I have a story on a potential solution to that problem. And also, of course, fact-checking a little bit of that rhetoric coming out tomorrow morning. Shameless plug. But yes, when I wasn't working on the settlement pre-write, that's what I was doing today, was a little bit of Olympic sports pipeline writing. So that was fun.
All right, good stuff. Glad you brought that up, Craig. Amanda, thank you so much for your expertise, knowledge, insight. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Awesome. You too. Thanks so much.
Amanda Christovich. You can go on Twitter it's A. Christovich, and then H at the end of it, 2 H's on her Twitter timeline. And again, sports business reporter, college sports, front office sports. And I've always enjoyed the way she breaks down things legally. We have a lot of legal experts that have joined the show, but I'm glad she was able to join us today.
You losing your voice?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
It sounds like it's you're losing it or something. Maybe my headphones are just down low, I guess. But Houston Christian is the name of the school.
What did I say, Baptist?
Yeah. Houston Christian's what they changed over to a couple of years ago. And she clarified a lot. I mean, made some of that understandable, whereas I'm just a dummy when it comes to a lot of the legalese stuff. But also, I'm glad she clarified it's not over. Like, it's not like, hey, here it's all passed and boom, here's everything. Like, there's a lot of unanswered questions. So when those get decided, then it'll be worthwhile to have her back on to discuss some of those details that they have yet to find out, but that they will soon once they get that proper paperwork. So I am sure they're eagerly awaiting that to figure out what all the details are, and that will, then enlighten us at some point as well on what to expect moving forward with this. But, it's one step closer to, I guess, having some sort of peace of mind for at least a little while, although, again, there's just a lot to figure out there. And, I'm interested to see where this goes now, see what, the government ends up doing as far as the NCAA trying to convince them that there's a system that can be had where athletes aren't employees, but they basically are employees in every other way, shape, and form. I don't know if that's going to go the way that they want it to from the NCAA point of view, because not much ever does, but this seems positive. I mean, especially if it's going to benefit Olympic sports and it's going to benefit other non-football sports. So many of the moves that have been made over the last few years have really been tied to football and, to a lesser extent, basketball, and the others have just kind of been there. The fact that they're going to benefit, I think, is a really good thing, and especially our Olympic sports. I think that's incredibly important that they stay as strong as possible.
When we come back, Grayson Grundhafer, 365 Sports recruiting analyst and also football analyst, will join us. We'll also, in the 4 o'clock hour, Brett McMurphy joins us, and also a new name that we're bringing to the table in Rod Baxley from USA Today, who covers North Carolina schools in the ACC. This is 365 Sports, and Ideal MRI in the Central Texas marketplace in the southern part of Waco. IdealMRI.com can help you with two things. One, that's the main reason you would want to go get an MRI, is to get some sort of image and also evidence of why you're in pain. Muscle, ligament, something else. Your doctor wants to even have a better, more evidence to give you a better diagnosis and also recovery. The MRI is going to show you what's going on, something that's ripped or torn, disconnected, or whatever, and they'll get it. Their state-of-the-art image machine is, I've been in it 3 or 4 times, and every single time, by the end of the day, I have received in the portal the images of, okay, here is what is wrong, whether it's your lower back, your shoulder, your knee, what part of your body that needed more, that's a problem. And then your doctor gets it too in the portal. Here's the other part, $497 or less every single time. The average MRI is $1,100. You pay $497 or less. Dr. Rob Maxey and his partners have created a great business for you and for them, but also saving you money and getting the image your doctor and you need at IdealMRI.com.
Y'all listen up. Let me tell you something about group meals from Rudy's Barbecue. It's got all you need for all the folks you gotta feed. Smoked meat, sides, and more. There's everything down to the tablecloth, just like the one that you see at the store. At a bridal shower, it's better than flowers. And a long distance meeting, it'll pass the hours. It'll feed all the cousins at a family function. It's better than potluck at a church luncheon. Next time you need to feed 10 or more, call and order a Rudy's group meal.
Next in line.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
Don Humidor, your home with a 48-foot walk-in humidor with the elite cigar brands from around the world, including the #1 cigar of the year, Aging Room Cuatro Nicaragua. Plus, they have the great brands like Macanudo and Artur Fuente, Rocky Patel, Aston, and so much more. CBD, great for sore muscles, aches and pains, sleep, Vita Dreams, and anxiety, mild depression, general health and wellness. Their staff very knowledgeable on the subject. Don Humidor in the Townwest Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Waco Custom Marketplace is your hometown grocery store with a full-service butcher shop and bakery. Hi, this is David Smoke. The butcher shop can take your customized orders for seafood, pork, and poultry and custom cut your favorite steaks from bacon-wrapped fillets, sirloin steaks, bone-in ribeyes, boneless ribeyes, and even prime rib. Cut specifically the way you want, the thickness that you want. They're all delicious. They have Norwegian salmon, mahi-mahi, catfish fillets, sliced ham or turkey, variety of cheese, and several options of sausage links, and even regular jalapeno or cheese snack sticks, fresh chicken breast or whole chickens, sliced bacon, pork chops, and ground beef, marinated beef or chicken fajitas, and always large briskets and tri-tip available, plus fresh vegetables. So the great product, customer service, and tradition continues at Waco Custom Marketplace, a full-service butcher shop and bakery, open Monday through Saturday. The Bauer family, Waco Custom Marketplace, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco, or WacoCustomMarketplace.com.
Ready to take your business to the next level? Carrion Solutions has got you covered. We deliver world-class IT consulting, including Quest On Demand and Migration Manager, M365 and Exchange migrations, Active Directory assessments, security hardening, and Windows Server upgrades. Our experts specialize in consulting, monitoring, support, and managed IT services. We promise vision, professionalism, and unbeatable value. Satisfaction guaranteed. If you're not happy, we make it right. Remember the name Carrion Solutions. For more info, email sales@carrionsolutions.com or visit carrionsolutions.com. That's CARRION solutions.com. Carrion Solutions IT success guaranteed.
Want to send a message to the show? Jump in the Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue chat room.
Enter if you dare. It's quite at times entertaining. It's always entertaining. The chat room with those who have been a part of this from the day we started 4+ years ago to those who join, and that is Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue. This segment brought to you by Richard Carr Motors, the Baylor Bear Hotline. Grayson Grundhafer joins us on recruiting and football and more. Grayson, thank you very much for your time. We know about Baylor being on a recruiting heater, and it's been a nice run. Does that pick up again, or is that something, there's a lull, or what?
I mean, it's definitely going to continue into this weekend. It's a really big one for Baylor, actually. It's a junior day, but it's also a day where they're going to have some 2025 commits on campus, as well as some 2025 prospects to go along with kind of your typical junior day where you have underclassmen and specifically the next class, which is 2026. So they've done a really nice job. I think 11 of the 17 commits will be on campus. A few 2025 prospects that I mentioned, a double-digit number of 4-star prospects in the 2026 class will be in Waco as well. So it's a really, kind of big and eventful weekend right before fall camp. They have their last summer camp of the year in the morning, and then in the afternoon they'll have junior day, kind of leading up into nighttime when everybody leaves. So it's another very important weekend. It's one of those weekends that it always is important right before fall camp. It gives you the opportunity to try to build on your future class while also potentially solidifying some more things in the current class. So again, a very big one for the Baylor staff, and that's why recruiting never stops. But at least when August comes around and there's a big dead period, things definitely kind of turn towards football season, which will be exciting as well.
Grayson, obviously the perception surrounding the class has changed over the last month. The rankings have changed. Everything's changed seemingly for the better. But how has the makeup of the class changed in terms of having some new voices as a part of that commitment list? Have new guys kind of blended in with the old and helped to take the reins? Have other new commits like kind of grabbed the reins themselves and taken off to try and build this class? Like how have those dynamics changed with the newer names that have been added?
I don't think a ton has changed. Obviously, Taz Williams and Kamarian Morgan have been very, I think vocal about trying to add to the class, especially Taz, since he gave his pledge to Baylor. And that's been fun to watch. I think all of these guys have done a good job in one way or another of trying to recruit other guys. And you're kind of seeing that this weekend, right? Where they're trying to, land guys in the 2026 class and get, more guys in the 2025 class. I mean, you're seeing, 11 guys from the class on campus. So you're seeing guys that really want to help build on not just their class, but the future class as well to help the program just continue to build. So that's been really encouraging. I think you're seeing a class that is, very locked in right now, very bought into the future of Baylor and kind of what the vision is under Dave Aranda. And I think that's worked out really, really well for them. And you kind of see it in the results on the recruiting trail, to be honest. And I think that's kind of where things are at right now. I know that, these guys are working on, adding some other guys, whether that means, adding flips or getting guys, who Baylor got in on a little bit later. Those things are definitely happening and might happen this weekend.
Who's the ringleader? Who's the godfather of this class that kind of leads this thing, that might be the one who has the group chat or text or whatever?
The guy who I think has been probably, one of the more vocal leaders, but also a guy who I think is doing a lot of work kind of behind the scenes, and he's also been in the class for a long time, is Shadow Creek wide receiver Ashton Jones. I think he does a great job of building relationships. We saw, with his teammate, the 4-star wide receiver Ja'Cory Watson. He committed to Baylor after Ashton did, and I think Ashton's built really good relationships with a lot of the commits in the class. So he's definitely been a big part of it. Like I mentioned, I think Kamarian Morgan definitely deserves a lot of credit. And it's not necessarily just, him, being very vocal or saying a lot of things, but I think his commitment in general spoke volumes. And then, of course, he was able to bring in one of his best friends in Taz Williams to the class. And then, it was a team effort to recruit Michael Turner. So you kind of saw that snowball effect once he committed. So I think he's a part of it as well. But in general, I think this is a really good class full of guys that, again, really want to make Baylor better, and they're doing everything they can to try to accomplish that.
What does this weekend entail for guys who will be visiting that are current commits?
So, I mean, most of it is just kind of getting to learn the program, getting to see more about, kind of what Baylor's about, especially for the 2026 guys. But for the 2025 guys, some of it is, for the commits, it's more about just being on campus again and recruiting other guys. But for the 2025 guys who are visiting this weekend, some of them haven't taken an official visit. So this is kind of acting as that. So they're going to have to go through kind of everything, from academics to, where they may be living to just kind of, position coach meeting. I mean, all of those things are going to be really key, I think, for those specific guys. But for the other guys, it's pretty much just being on campus again and just kind of seeing Baylor, trying to get a vibe about Baylor. And I also think the big thing that might happen this weekend, I haven't gotten this confirmed. I don't know, to what level this is going to happen, but I would assume that there will probably be some tour of the new ops facility, which will be, I think, very important. I know a lot of guys have mentioned that and talked about wanting to get on campus for that. I'm curious if they're able to kind of show that off a little bit more on this visit weekend, because I think that would be very, very nice for them and something that they can really show these guys that maybe separates Baylor even more.
Have you been in it at all in the skeleton with the beams going up? Have you been over there?
I have not. I've been on the outside multiple times at camps, and I've seen multiple tours, but I have not been inside it quite yet. I'm hoping to soon, though.
Yeah, and I'm sure you will be, and I'm sure they would want us to be, that during the spring football practice, because it was not really a scrimmage, it was a glorified practice, but it was 7-on-7. I was able to, because I was supposed to go through one of the side doors. Brent Ingram told me to meet him there, but I kept walking, and I then went to the guts underneath what is a major part of that building, and it's massive inside. Now, that's all been changed up, renovated, added, whatever, but it's huge underneath there, and it's something that really was surprising to me, how much space is in an area that you don't maybe really see.
Right. I mean, the tour that they showed on social media, I think it was during the spring, really gave you an idea of what all they're trying to fit in there. And I think that's a big reason why, you mentioned just how massive it is. I mean, they're going to put all the offices in there. They're going to have, a place to eat, a nutrition center, a full weight room. I mean, just kind of all these different things, a recovery room, a locker room. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very spacious building and something that is, meant to home, the Baylor football program for a long time. So, yeah, they definitely went all out for it. And I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to be a game changer for Baylor, even though it's not necessarily, what people talk about anymore. Everyone's saying, these don't matter. NIL is all that matters. But you still got to keep up to a certain extent with your facilities. You can't let them completely slide, because then you're giving advantages to other programs when it comes to a nutrition, recovery, strength and conditioning standpoint that can really set you back.
Grayson, we've been doing some articles here and there leading up to the season, and I know one of them was about our biggest question marks, and you were first to post, I think, and so you mentioned the O-line. I think everybody's like, that's everybody's really, but we were able to, have some other answers that added on to that, even though that's clearly the number one. And that remains number one, and that will remain number one until we actually see this team out on the field. But just where do you feel like overall this team is right now? I mean, recruiting's obviously going really well. You got media days behind them. I mean, it's all sights set on fall camp here in the next few days. So how are you feeling with all we've learned over the last few months about where Baylor football is entering 2024?
I continue to feel cautiously optimistic, and it's not really an optimism where I'm saying, oh yeah, Baylor can, win the Big 12 championship or anything like that. I don't have any, expectations for that. But what I do think you're going to see is a much improved football team. And I think at all levels, they've added transfers. They added guys who I think can be very impactful to the program. They went out and got a transfer quarterback that was a hot commodity for a lot of programs in the entire country. I just think in general, you're seeing a program that's changed, whether it's Dave Aranda or the coaching changes that they've made or the personnel changes or what they said at Big 12 Media Days. I think a lot of it points to a new direction for this program, and I think that's a great thing. After what we saw last year and at the end of the 2022 season, a lot of things had flipped. And I think the luster from what they had in 2021, where you just had all this shine and all this praise after winning Big 12 championship, it kind of wore off. And I think you're at a point now where you can kind of get away from that and start trying to find a new model to start winning football games. I think that's what you're seeing. The changes in the spread offense in particular, I think are very key for Baylor this offseason. Dave Aranda taking over as defense coordinator as well. So I'm feeling, again, cautiously optimistic. I do think this is going to be a bowl team. I think they're going to get 6 wins. The more that I look at the schedule, the more that I look at the roster, I think Baylor definitely has that. And I also think they're good enough to be very competitive in just about every single game on their schedule, which means you're going to have a lot of coin flip games. And it's just going to come down to, which way the ball bounces on any given day. But I do think Baylor far improved from how bad they were a year ago.
We showed a list that was a part of one of the metrics of the fastest players in college football yesterday. DeQuan Finn was like 5 or 6 or so on that list. Garrett brought up that he was surprised that Monterey Baldwin was not a part of the list. Again, this is every college football player based on the sensors that players now wear inside their game day uniforms. Who do you think might be faster? Is it Finn, or do you think Monterey?
Oh, Monterey is definitely faster in a race. I really don't think there's any question about that. But I think it's also important to mention that when you're doing it on the field, it's very different, right? When you're in a game setting, it's different than if you just line up on the track. But if they're on the track, I do think that would be Monterey. But I thought that was really interesting. And I don't think Baylor fans recognize really just how athletic DeQuan Finn is and what he can do in the open field. This guy is an absolute game breaker. And, I mean, you look at his numbers, he's had over 500 yards and I think it's like 7 or 8 touchdowns pretty much every single year on the ground. So you're a given to get that this year from him. That's what he's definitely going to bring to the table. And that's so different than what Baylor has had in past seasons. He's not necessarily the best at designed runs. You're not going to see Baylor just, snapping it to him and him doing a lot of QB power. You might see it some, but not a ton. But where he does thrive is when he gets outside the pocket on pass plays. He makes people miss, and he is, like you said, a sneaky fast, but that sneaky fast really isn't sneaky. He's an absolutely great athlete, and that's going to be on full display, I think, for Baylor fans, and something that I think is going to really, really change how productive they are offensively.
Grayson, thank you very much. Grayson Grundhafer, Sikkim365.com, lead recruiting analyst, college football analyst as well, with us on Fridays in that late 3 o'clock hour. We kind of carried it over in the 4 o'clock hour, and we appreciate his time. In the next hour, in fact, we'll hear from Rod Baxley, who covers the ACC, and then also Brett McMurphy will join us in about 30 minutes. This is 365 Sports. PettyClinicLowT.com. I've talked about Dr. Petty and his ability to help if you have issues with low testosterone, with testosterone replacement therapy. What are some of the issues of what you see or why you have or if there's low testosterone? Reduced energy, decreased muscle mass and strength, decreased general mood and ambition, being tired like more than normal, abdominal fat accumulation, in other words, a little body fat around your midsection, even though you're active, you have a nice diet, and you even maybe exercise quite a bit, loss of sexual interest, and, of course, there's the ED factor. Dr. Kent Petty can help you with that, and here's how he can do that. You contact him, PettyClinicLowT.com. There's a phone number there, email there, tell him I sent you, and tell him you aren't so sure, but you have some of those symptoms. He will, and so will his staff, set you up to get your blood work. They take care of that. They get the blood work back, get the results, and if your testosterone level is too low, Dr. Petty and his staff can put you in a program to increase your testosterone level and also get rid of or work on some of or all of those symptoms. Dr. Kent Petty, PettyClinicLowT.com.
Celebrate American quality and value during the Red, White, and Blue sales tag event at Richard Carr. Drive the best. Get professional-grade power and first-class interior in a GMC Sierra. Qualified buyers save $9,000 on all 2024 GMC Sierra SLT models in stock with qualified trade-in. Military and first responders save an extra $500. Plus, find Red, White, and Blue savings tags on vehicles all over the lot. Drive home American quality and value during our Red, White, and Blue sales tag event at Richard Carr GMC.
Richard Carr. They have the truck for you.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at AllianceBankTexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Developed by by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student-athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student-athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student-athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow at GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student-athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine now has 2 locations to serve you. The original on Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street and the brand new spot in downtown Waco at 600 Franklin Avenue. If you're looking for the best in craft beers or local Texas bourbons, then the original is the place to be. And for the latest trends and online phenomenons, head downtown to the Franklin location. Either way, you're going to get the same great variety, customer service, and speedy experience. Check out both locations on their Facebook and Instagram pages. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street, and now downtown on Franklin Avenue.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoke and Craig Smoke.
Here we go, this 4 o'clock hour. Rod Baxley covers North Carolina State, Duke, among others, and also for the USA Today Sports Department. Joins Craig Smoke, David Smoke here on 365 Sports. Rod, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with the week that was with the ACC. Jim Phillips opening comments and seemed to be pretty strong in what he had to say after what has been a lot of drama. How would you grade what Jim Phillips said and the tone he set?
Yeah, good to be with you guys, man. It kind of followed the same tune that he had a few weeks ago at a big sports editor conference where it was combative. I mean, he's mostly a big-time positive guy when it comes to promoting the conference and its members. And it's nothing against the athletes or the coaches. He's reiterated that many times. But as he said the last month, the ACC is prepared to take this to the finish line as far as fighting and trying to withstand what Clemson and Florida State are trying to do as far as abandoning the grant of rights agreement there.
Rod, I mean, I'm sure you've seen all of the people with their scenarios on what's going to happen and all of the speculation and this and that. But, man, you're right there in the heart of North Carolina. You cover these schools. What's just sort of the I guess, the feel, the talk, and just the level of curiosity when it comes to North Carolina and North Carolina State and the future of the ACC?
Man, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, you look at last year. I mean, Mac Brown said it earlier this week. He never would have guessed in a million years that USC and UCLA would be in the Big Ten of all conferences. I mean, playing at Michigan and going to Ohio State, those West Coast teams. So anything's up for grabs. I think in reality, we're all moving toward these super conferences where it'll probably likely be all of these great programs and big time schools together in 3 or maybe just 2 super conferences. I know UNC is probably the biggest get as far as fish go with what they have basketball wise and football wise. But then you throw in NC State and Duke, they've got some likable traits too. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen next week, man, much less next year. But it won't be boring. We know that.
Is it as much of a talking point as it seems to be, like on a daily basis, online, for example, in college football circles?
Yeah, I would say in the off season it ramps up a bit because everybody's waiting to get to the game,
right,
and talk about the team. So it's easier to talk about this stuff when you don't have football to distract you. But I think the closer we get to the season, the only thing these people care about and fans care about is getting to see these guys on the field and trying to maintain these regional rivalries as best they can. They want to see Carolina and State continue to play. They want to see Carolina and Duke and State and Wake Forest continue to play. So as long as they can keep those regional rivalries in place, I think once the season starts, people don't really, get into the battle of who's going where.
We got to know Mack Brown very well when he was at Texas and had the great run there that then ended, obviously, pretty quickly after they played Alabama for a national title. It just didn't end well. Great guy. We love him. He can have rabbit ears, but he's also someone I love to listen to, and we're fortunate to have him on a handful of times. What were your thoughts about what he said about those programs that have recruited against his age, and that 6 coaches who he thinks were doing that, they are no longer with the programs they were representing?
Man, we've heard him say some form of that same statement, I feel like, the last 3 years. And he's not lying. I mean, he said it after, I feel like, every December signing day now, because somebody always asks the question, when's he going to retire? What's his mindset there? Is he going to quit? And then he goes down that path of talking to recruits and getting that question from recruits and bringing up the coaches that are no longer coaches and going from there. So we've heard it the last few years. When there's more cameras at ACC kickoff, though, and you get Twitter and social media involved, it can fan the flames, so to speak.
So 8-5 a year ago, what's the general feel around, what that Tar Heels team is going to look like, what the expectations are, and how they feel about said expectations?
Yeah, the big question is quarterback, right? I mean, you had Drake May, you had Sam Howell the last few years, and now you don't have a guy like that. So a guy like that can cover up a lot of mistakes. The defense has not been good. Mac's been very open about all of this, and he says all the right things. But it feels like this offseason, he really made an effort to finally address the depth and see if we can start playing more guys as far as the Tar Heels are concerned, because that's been the one lacking area. They have not been able to finish seasons, and he feels like, some of those top players are playing 800, 900 snaps, and it's just not sustainable when a lot of your tougher games are at the end of the year. And you've seen it the last 3 years with Carolina. They've failed down the stretch. That's been a big area. You bring in Jeff Collins, who they call the Minister of Mayhem from his time as the defensive coordinator in the SEC and then Georgia Tech. So we'll see if he can improve the defense. I don't think it can get much worse.
Right.
But when you have quarterback questions, man, it's not a good situation to be in, especially when you're talking about football, the most important position in football and in sports, probably.
Have they not wasted, but they miss an opportunity to have someone like Sam Howell and then Drake May as their quarterbacks and not reach that next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is kind of easy to say that, and they have to a certain extent. But a lot of these games have been toss-ups. They just haven't made a play here or there. They've been in them. They just haven't been able to make that extra play you need to make to win those big-time games that you need. But when you have guys like that, like you said, you want to take advantage of those opportunities because, I mean, they got back-to-back guys like that. But, heck, most of these guys get a great quarterback, and they're waiting, another 5 or 10 years to try to catch lightning in a bottle again. So you don't want to waste those opportunities. But Max said something interesting yesterday as far as them being more complimentary with a guy like Amarian Hampton, who's going to be one of the best running backs in the ACC. So maybe without that crutch, so to speak, as far as the talented quarterback, they'll be more well-rounded and kind of address the things that need to be addressed.
Rod, did you get a chance to cover NC State in the Pop-Tarts Bowl last year?
I did not. I was actually on vacation that week. Funnier, I was in Orlando for vacation. I just didn't happen to, be at Camping World Stadium or whatever it's called now.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, no, it's. I was just curious because you hear so many things about that bowl game and just the fun of it all, and great review. So I was curious about that. But NC State finished their season there a year ago, missed out on 10 wins, losing in that bowl game. But Dave Doran's 8 wins, 9 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins is how the last 4 years have gone. Grayson McCall now in the fold, though, a year removed from Brennan Armstrong. Just what's the feel about the situation at quarterback and the excitement level for the Wolfpack this year?
Yeah, you hear it all around here, man. They're talking about the year of the wolf after what the basketball team did and what the baseball team did, after what Doran did as far as the transfer portal is concerned. Now you lose a guy like Peyton Wilson, who cleaned up a lot of mistakes with what he did defensively. But offensively, this has a chance to be a group as talented as any Doran's had. So I think they're all in on this season. They'll have some opportunities right out of the gate with Tennessee and Clemson in September. So if they can show up in those two games, there's a path to the 12-team playoff for sure.
What is it that when you hear about the ACC, and we understand the success of Clemson and Florida State recently, that it just seems like that NC State gets overlooked. Yet they have, as Craig mentioned, that's pretty steady with what they've done under Doran.
Yeah, it's a great mystery, right? I mean, we hear so much about the SEC, and to be frank, they just do a much better job of promoting themselves, promoting their talent as far as guys like Paul Feinbaum and getting their product out there. The ACC's kind of been behind the mark in that regard. So I think you have to point at some of that. And then, I mean, NC State, big regionally, but as far as national relevance, it's not a needle mover like some of these SEC and Big Ten programs.
What would a win against Tennessee and or Clemson, obviously winning both would be staggering and not like a stun, shocking, but that would be like more than anyone could possibly fathom. But what would a win against either one of them mean?
Oh, my God, they'll be talking about college football playoff the next day or later that night, for sure, 100%. Knowing Wolfpack fans, that'll be the case with a win in either scenario.
Final thing, Rod, thanks for your time. How much have the lawsuits with Florida State, Clemson come into play at all with other schools in the ACC?
Phillips mentioned this earlier in the week, too. As far as the coaches and players, I don't think it's really affected any of these guys. They still talk to each other. They still want to worry about what's the product on the field, because a lot of the quote-unquote enemies here are these board of trustees guys or presidents that, are trying to money grab. So when it comes to just the game and just these relationships between players, coaches across the league, I don't think it's been a, kind of a shunned situation. I think everybody's just kind of keeping in their lane and supporting everybody.
Thank you, man. Great to have you on, Rod.
Yes,
we'll
sir.
be in touch. Rod Baxley, USA Today, covers North Carolina, Duke, NC State, North Carolina, the Tar Heels, among other. Big basketball guy, too. We appreciate his time.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like everywhere else where you're just sort of sitting back and waiting for clarity on what the future is going to look like for North Carolina in particular, and then NC State. We know there will be some ramifications for them one way or the other as well. But, yeah, I don't think you can sit there and let it become a distraction, especially with football around the corner. You got to go out and play, and you're in the ACC, and all that matters is winning games. So I do wonder how much of a sidestep, and this very much has been like especially the last month of like the off season's waning days, and like that's when everything gets stirred up. I don't think that's ever coincidental, but it does sound pretty like ACC media days outside of Jim Phillips' day one address, pretty uneventful. Honestly, the whole week itself and just the news cycle surrounding it. He made his statement, and then after that, I mean, unless you were paying attention to something individually or team-wise specifically, there really wasn't a whole lot else that came out of those days.
Yeah, you got to go dig into those who are actually covering specific teams or whatever, and to really hear much about. I don't have anything hardly at all that Mike Norvell said with Florida State the same day that Phillips opened up ACC media days, and someone who has been all over the place with media days and a great journalist. We joined by Brett McMurphy now, Action Network HQ, our guy on 365 Sports. Brett, thank you very much. What were your thoughts about what Jim Phillips and any kind of tone or how he handled the start of the ACC media days to kind of calm the waters or at least keep anything from getting too much drama?
Yeah, I mean, I give him credit. I mean, no matter what he says, like if he would have not even addressed it, or if he addressed it the way he addressed it, bottom line is Florida State's continuing with the lawsuit. Clemson's doing the same, and we'll have to see if they can get out, how quickly they can get out, what's it going to cost, is there a settlement, all those different things. But, you know, Phillips has made it clear, you know, they're not going to back down. They believe that they're in the right. They believe Florida State's in the wrong. I actually got an email from a Florida State fan this morning about, I guess my story from last week about Florida State not being wanted by the Big Ten or SEC because they were, quote, a bad partner. And he goes, how can you call them a bad partner? And then he went into all the different claims that Florida State has, which I don't necessarily disagree with. And I responded to him. I said, I'm not calling Florida State a bad partner. I go, but the university presidents and the conference officials and TV execs that Florida State needs the support of in the Big Ten and the SEC is calling them a bad partner. So whether that's accurate or not, that's the perception of Florida State with the people that matter. But, you know, I was told at ACC spring meetings back in May that, you know, the ACC is going to drag this out as long as possible. You know, kind of like I may have mentioned to you before, kind of like Dean Smith's North Carolina offense, get in that four corners and stall, because the last thing you want to do is give Florida State a number so then they can start working to get out. And obviously, depending on that number, will others follow suit.
Brett, you are all over Big Ten Media Days, at ACC Media Days going on this week. You have a ton of information, so I don't even know where to begin. But so I'll just ask you with, like, did anything in particular stand out to you in regards to just the events of this week and perhaps above others? I know you had a lot of Lincoln Riley stuff. You had the Deshaun Foster moment at the podium, just everybody's, you know, personal stories as far as their teams go. What sticks with you from this week?
It's kind of all my brain's like mush.
Yeah, I bet.
You know, I started out in Vegas with you guys, and then I got coming back from that trip. I was part of the nationwide airplane grounding, so I spent 19 hours in the Atlanta airport, and then coming back from Big Ten, the flight was, you know, postponed 5 hours. So instead of getting back at 9 p.m., I get back at 2 a.m., which everyone listening absolutely cares 0.0% about. So one thing with Lincoln, and it's funny, you know, I know him pretty well, and you know, and you guys know this. You kind of relate to people with how they treat you, and if they treat you well, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they're a jerk, then maybe you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. So I guess I'm kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. But I just noticed on, you know, social media, some of the stuff I tweeted on his quotes and his different things. Man, there was a lot of blowback. Yeah. Like, you know, he's, you know, using all these excuses and yada, yada, yada. The only time he really, he answered everything, you know, evenly keel, laughed, made light of different things and had fun with it. The only exception is when he was asked about the comments from Joe Castiglione, and he basically said, I'm not going to mention that. I'm not going to talk about that. Next question. You know, he raised his voice. He's obviously, that was a sore spot with him. But guys, the one thing that he mentioned, and I asked Dan Lanning about this next day. Lanning disagreed with what Lincoln said. It doesn't mean either one's right or wrong. But I asked him specifically, you know, what happens if you have a conference title game berth secured? Is it possible that you could rest players like in the NFL does in the final regular season game? And Lincoln said, you know, that's something that you have to consider. He said that's something that, you know, his staff has actually started kind of looking at different scenarios, because if you play either a conference team, or in the case of USC, if you're playing Notre Dame in the season finale, and it's not going to impact you in the conference race, depending on your position in the rankings, depending on your position, you know, if you lose that game and win the conference if you win the conference title, you're in the playoff. If you lose the conference title game, you're out. So that's kind of, I think, something that's going to be different that we really have never experienced in the college game. And we have kids opt out in bowl games. But in the regular season, the fact that you could have these college coaches actually rest star players, you know, to save them for the conference championship game, So I kind of thought that was fascinating that, that again, that's another difference when we go to a 12-team playoff, kind of different things. And we don't know what to expect this year. Well, I think this year will be pretty wild and crazy.
So the question was about like sitting a regular season game, like the week before the conference title game, right?
Yeah. If you've got, I think, like Georgia, I think plays Georgia Tech in their finale. If Georgia has a berth to the SEC locked up, because that's a non-conference game, why do you play your stars against Georgia Tech? Now, obviously, if you lose that game, you're going to slip in the rankings. But if you're Georgia, and probably this isn't going to happen, but you're ranked number 15, and you lose that game to Georgia Tech, well, you're going to drop to 18 or 19 or 20 or whatever. But if you win the conference championship, you're going to get a automatic bid anyway. If you beat Georgia Tech and lose the conference championship game, again, if they were ranked that low, they're not going to get in. So that's kind of, it's funny just looking out Georgia. They finished their SEC regular season schedule November 16th. Then they have games against UMass and Georgia Tech. So yeah, potentially Georgia, if they have any players left on the roster that haven't been arrested, they would probably rest them or arrest them. There you go. Yeah. Enjoy the veal. But yeah, that's it. But obviously, it's not every school has that schedule. Most of the schools in the season with a conference game and not as opposed to a non-conference game. But again, trying to talk to your listeners here. Mm-hmm. So for instance, in the Big 12. Utah's the favorite to win the Big 12. Will they? We'll find out. Well, guess what? Their final regular season game is at UCF. So what if Utah comes into that final regular season game against UCF with 2 losses? They've locked up a spot in the Big 12 title game, and they're ranked about 12 to 18. Well, they know they've probably got to win the conference championship to get in. Because if you lose the conference championship anywhere around 12-8, you're going to drop. If you've locked up the conference title game, you're going to play at UCF on a short week on a Friday night. Do you maybe just say, okay, we're going to rest our guys because that game isn't going to impact this? Because if we don't win the conference title, we're not in the playoff. So does Utah rest Rising and a couple other stars so they're ready for the next week for the Big 12 title game? That's some of the scenarios I think Lincoln's referring to where it could get kind of funky, at the end of the year. And again, this will be based on where these teams are ranked.
Well, college football is getting closer to the NFL, so this is something that might come with that. I just saw the note that Ra Thomas at Georgia has been suspended indefinitely. You saw the story earlier today. Kirby's smart, and I know that there's been a lot of these traffic and speeding and whatever, reckless driving, and of course there was a tragedy a couple of years ago. Does Georgia have a problem, and how are they going to fix it, or can they?
I guess it's your definition of the word problem, but there's, certainly they're not listening to the head coach, or they're not taking serious whatever the repercussions are for this stuff. Because since that horrible tragedy, they lost 2 members of the Bulldogs. They've had 24, not different players, but 24 traffic violations by Georgia players. And I don't know if all of them, but the majority of them are ridiculous high speed, speeding tickets. I'm not talking about going 50 and a 40. I'm talking about going 80 and a 40. I mean, there's a big difference there. You're endangering lives. So, there's been 24 of those. And, it was at SEC Media Days, and Kirby was asked about that. And, he said, look, he's disappointed, and, he said all the right things. And, we're in the process of improving the education, driver safety, yada, yada. But then he kind of said, look, we've actually suspended a player for a driving citation, and he basically said there's been no other college football program that's suspended a player for a driving violation. That's true, but there's no other college program that has even a fourth as many driving violations as Georgia. So they need to do something. This is obviously different. He's innocent until proven guilty. But again, it's not a good look. I don't know if you guys remember, unfortunately they stopped doing this. I don't know who did it, but it was one of the greatest things about college football was, you guys remember the Fulmer Cup?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. For the people that don't know what that is, somebody on the internet kept track of all the college football programs, and you got points every time you had a player that was arrested. Mm-hmm. And basically named after Phil Fulmer, the team that had the most points, and it's based on how severe the arrest were, would win the mythical Fulmer Cup every year. Well, I think Georgia's maybe back-to-back defending titles with the Fulmer Cup, but they're certainly the favorites right now. But yeah, it's a bad look. It's unfortunate. What's Georgia going to do? And the reality of it is, guys, if Georgia wins a national title, probably a lot of Georgia fans aren't going to care. And that's just being honest. That's how we are, today's world.
No, you're absolutely right. Winning will take care of that, no problem, unless something else horrific happens, and you cross your fingers that won't be the case. But if it does, I don't think it will come as a surprise to anybody, unfortunately. So, Brett, you mentioned just kind of the whirlwind, and look, we got back from Vegas, and I was like, man, I'm glad we got turned down for SEC Media Days in a way, because I don't know if we had the energy, much less you. You went from Vegas to SEC to then this week and all the events there. Was your head kind of swirling seeing Oregon at Big Ten Media Days and Oklahoma and Texas with the SEC and, the Four Corners with the Big 12? Has that all kind of settled into your brain yet, or is it going to take everybody being out on the field this season to make it all kind of still make some sense?
It was seeing the Four Corner schools with the Big 12 really didn't seem that different. I mean, obviously the league's grown by 4. Seeing OU and Texas in the SEC wasn't really that strange. But yeah, seeing Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA in the Big Ten, that's when it really hit home. Wow, this is, they're not in the Pac-12 anymore. Mm-hmm. They're playing Pac-12 bowls the next 2 years, but they're not in the Pac-12 anymore. And yeah, a lot of people were talking about the travel. Matt Rule in Nebraska thought that the two biggest factors this coming season will be travel and injuries. Travel and weather. Where Lincoln Riley said, look, when the Rams go play the Jets, nobody makes a big deal about it. Why is it a big deal when college kids are going to go make these trips? So we'll have to see if there is an impact. You look at the schedules. Oregon, who's going to be picked top 3, at worst top 4 in the preseason poll that comes out August 12th. 5 of their first 6 games are in the Pacific time zone. Well, 3 of their final 6 games are out east in either the Eastern or Central time zone. So will that impact them or not? I don't know. I mean, Oregon's really, really good. So, obviously the better teams are going to be impacted less than the kind of middle of the road teams. But I think ultimately overall, with all these changes in the conferences, like you mentioned, I think the winner of the Big Ten, I think the winner of the SEC both have 2 losses. I just think with these new schedules, playing the TV heavyweights against each other, you're going to have more losses. You're no longer going to have half of your games where after halftime you can just cruise and play your starters. The starters are going to have to play longer. They're going to have to play in the fourth quarter. Then there's going to be more injuries. And then after you're coming off a game with 2 highly ranked teams, and now you're, in their SEC, now you got to go to Mississippi State, or now you got to go to Kentucky, or, in the Big Ten, now you go to Rutgers, or now you go to Purdue and face the Spoilermakers. Then I think some of these big name ranked teams are going to get upset because it's human nature. There's going to be a letdown. And so I think that's what's going to make this first season with the 12-team playoff so intriguing, is we're going to have a boatload of teams with 2 and 3 losses, and how the committee, ranks them, and specifically who they rank ahead of each other and how much strength of schedule comes into play.
All right, Craig brought up where you were, where you've been. You've mentioned that it's kind of a whirlwind, a mush. How often can you go 10 or 20 minutes without your phone dinging, with text messages, phone calls, you vice versa doing that as well? I'd like to know, because I think that mine goes off quite a bit, and we're on a show that has really picked up around the country, but how about you?
Excluding you guys texting me to come on the show, Smokey, I really don't get any text messages at all. I really got a nice AT&T plan. No, it's crazy. It's no, and that's just that's just kind of how it is. I don't know how I've gotten guilty of, like, if a couple of them come in at once and I don't glance down at it right away, and then I go back and glance at it, I'll see one of them, and then I won't see the response from the other one until like an hour later. I'm like, oh, geez, I can get back to this person. But no, it's crazy. But hey, man, the good news is we're in the home stretch. We're going to actually have some games coming up in the next few weeks. Like I mentioned, the AP poll comes out August 12th. I'm sure everyone listening will agree with all of my selections from 1 to 25. So no need reaching out to me on Twitter. I know you guys will agree with every one of my picks. And then, a couple weeks after that, we'll finally have some games, and we can quit talking about, player arrest and lawsuits. And, well, we won't, but at least we'll have games to talk about instead of all that stuff.
When you started at the Tampa Bay Times, was there a story
Tampa
there?
Tribune.
I'm sorry, Tampa Tribune.
Which no longer exists.
Was there a story there that kind of launched your career?
No, not really. But probably the biggest story was after I left the Tampa Tribune to go to it was called AOL Fan House, which doesn't exist anymore. I uncovered that now former USF coach, but then USF coach Jim Leavitt had hit a player in the locker room, and I reported that for AOL Fan House. He lied about it. The school had an investigation. He was fired. So that obviously brought me into the national spotlight, and then from there I went to CBS and then ESPN, and then laid off from ESPN, and then broke the stuff with Urban Meyer and Zach Smith at Ohio State. So obviously I learned a lot in Tampa, but yeah, it was probably right after I left there when I made kind of the biggest impact nationally, if you will.
Well, glad you did, and thanks for your time, Brett. We always do appreciate it, and enjoy maybe a little bit of decompression time between now and when everything does pick up again here pretty soon. Thanks for your time. Have a great weekend. You got it. Keep those texts coming, guys. Yes, sir. Brett McMurphy, Action Network HQ, was at the Tampa Tribune. It was said no longer in existence. Went to AOL Fan House, no longer in existence. But he then hit it with CBS, ESPN, laid off, didn't stop the grind, and now a major contributor and impact when it comes to college football and reporting it. Go ahead.
I can't imagine having gone to every media day the last 3 weeks. That would have driven me absolutely insane. I give them credit for he and others who had to go through that circuit. Not that it's like digging ditches for a living by any stretch of the imagination, but just being cooped up in those breakout interviews and all of that for, like 15 out of the last 20 days or whatever it's been would be enough to have you wanting to take a little bit of a break this next month before the actual game start up, I would think, and just kind of not hear anybody talk for a while. But, good stuff as always with Brett. And, we touched on the expansion piece at the very top. And, again, that's all related to the ongoing lawsuit. I mean, bottom line, like, people can try and force an idea forward and hope that it happens faster, but the courts are going to move at their pace, or the schools and those involved are going to work it on their own pace. And so we all just sit back and await what that's going to look like whenever that's going to actually happen. But it does seem like it's at least partially starting to give way to that little ray of sunlight that is the actual football season around the corner. And I am, like Brett, very much looking forward to that. The House deal today, it's kind of a big deal. I mean, it is and it isn't, in that it's still going to, have some holes to go through and some some T's to cross and things like that. But starting to see some of the information leak out as all these reporters are getting the information is pretty interesting to see. But, that's cool. All the other talk of just various things that have happened this summer are cool. But, man, I'm a college football fan for the football. The other stuff makes it spicy and interesting, kind of like the NFL with free agency and things like that. But I'm so intrigued by a lot of the storylines that we've discussed so much that what does Dylan Gabriel at Oregon in the Big Ten look like? Like what does Texas with Quinn Ewers back, but a lot of big playmakers no longer on that team from last year look like in year one of the SEC? And like we can spend the next hour and a half on this show going over individual storylines throughout the landscape. And I'm just so excited to see what some of those answers are here in about 4 weeks from now. And, we're almost there.
Well, it's the last weekend in August is kind of a full weekend, but there's those games one in Dublin, Florida State, of course. I think, was it Duke that they're playing in Dublin? And there's a couple other games that open up the weekend before. And I'm not sure it's Florida State Duke, but I think it is.
I think it's Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech, okay. And last year it was Nebraska and Northwestern, I believe. Yeah. All right, when we come back, a couple of other stories. I want to go on the chat room. I brought this up earlier, and we do have Brandon Marcelo around the corner just at the top of 5 o'clock hour. We are also going to have that Phil Steele interview from earlier this week that's like 30 minutes of football porn. We're going to play that again today, if that's okay. Plus, Paul has his top 5. But I want to get into, from the chat room, on the Southwest Airlines story, which is not a college football story, but it could be a college fan traveling to games. And do you like the decision they've made about how you're going to select your seats?
Okay, we can get to that. I do want to make one mention of Ross Dellinger, and he's pouring through the documents that have been released in the House case. And just one part of it that I wanted to touch on before we pretty much move on entirely. So this has to do with the roster limits, and for football specifically, you're looking at we already knew this, but officially it's 85 scholarships. It's now 105 scholarships. And you can go up to that. You cannot go past that. You can just stick with 85, but if you want to, you can go to 105. He also mentioned that in some sports, obviously you're not required to use all, like I just mentioned, but in some cases, like you'll still have your walk-ons, so they're not going away entirely. And there will also be, I guess with like baseball especially, like partial scholarships will still be in play to some extent. But I really don't know what this all means in the grand scheme of things. I don't know if this is good or bad. Like, I think it's good for players, but, like, I don't know to what extent, and I don't know how much that's offset or balanced out by the bad that could be created from this. So I'm very interested in this whole additional scholarship storyline in particular. But he's got a full-blown chart that shows you how much each sport will increase. And the old limit that you had, if you had, like, every single sport imaginable, you had 507.8 scholarships.
Yep.
Okay? Under the new limit, which football alone's 20, but you go from 507.8 full scholarships, or I guess it wouldn't be full because it's 0.8, but 507.8 scholarships under the old limit to, if you sponsor every sport at its max, 507.8 to 1,260. So more than double the amount of scholarships.
752.2.
Yeah, 752.2 additional scholarships have now been made available for every sport in total. And that rate, I mean, like, for example, baseball, the 11.7 goes all the way to 34. Men's basketball, they just get 2 additional.
Yeah.
Women's basketball stays the exact same. They actually are one of the few sports, if not maybe the only sport actually, that doesn't have an increase based on what I'm seeing. They're the only sport. They already had 15. They'll stay at 15. And then
the largest increase?
Huh?
Rugby.
Yeah, the largest. Yeah, so women's basketball is 0 increase. That's the only sport unaffected. But rugby, women's rugby goes from 12 scholarships to 65. So if you want to, you can go have a baller rugby squad and, take that to however high you want to, all the way up to 65 from 12. But, I mean, that's obviously a sport that benefits tremendously. I don't know how much money you're losing because you don't make money off of it to begin with, and then you're going to add, I don't care about that. That's not my money, so I'm not trying to count it. But I just that's just one of the many parts of the additional scholarships that I'm fascinated by, like how all this
Stanford has
will
a massive endowment, and some other schools do too, and they might pick it up this way. Equestrian, 35 more.
Which that's good news for Oklahoma State and Baylor and TCU.
Men's track and field combined, 60 more. Lacrosse, men 35.4 additional scholarships. Women's lacrosse 26. The biggest, rugby 53, rowing from 20 to 68.
I mean, men's
51 for stunt.
Track. I mean, we're going probably over every one of them, but. Men's track and women's track is not that far behind, but you're going from 12.6 on the men's side to potentially, and I think of like Texas Tech here and, obviously Texas. So there's a lot of other programs that have had really good track teams. With the men's side, you go from that's actually 6 to 45.
Yep.
So, like, I don't know how, what is that even going to be necessary for anybody out there to try and even put that together? Like, how does that work? Again, I do think this scholarship increase is going to be really fun and interesting to dig into as we kind of see how it all is applied and who applies it and how they spread it out.
By the way, acrobatic and tumbling, which Baylor's dominated, it's not an NCAA approved sport yet, but it will be. You wonder about that's another one that might be added to the list. But yeah, 500 something scholarships that are available. Now 752. So again,
No.
is this?
There was 500 available. There's now another 752
additional scholarships that are now available. And if, let's say, you sponsored 35 of those sports or 27 of those sports, so it'll be interesting. We'll have Mac Rhodes on here in the next couple of weeks. Will be interesting to see how this affects any school and what he thinks, plus others. We'll have other commissioners and conference commissioners and coaches on the show, ADs on the show in the next handful of weeks between now and the season, too. But golly. Man, that's a bunch. Volleyball. I didn't know this. Men's volleyball. Beach volleyball for the women. 6, now 19. So who's going to pay for that? The school? Who's endowments? Both?
I mean, who cares, honestly? Like, I don't care. It's not my money. It's kind of like you brought up the taxes question for athletes earlier, and I understand kind of like initially with NIL, that was one of those like boogeyman things of like, well, they know they got to pay taxes, right? And I think we were all kind of wondering the same thing. But, I mean, at this point, it's like that's their problem,
that's
man.
Not
Like, that's not my problem, and I don't care how they pay their taxes. I don't care, so long as they're getting taxed like I am just as a regular American, if that's what needs to be applied, that's all I'm worried about is that everybody's got to deal with the same BS. But, as far as, like, whether the wide receiver at Georgia Tech's taking care of his taxes, not my problem, never will be my problem, and, let them deal with that. But it's not going to ruin my fandom. I do think, though, there's a lot to absorb as an athlete nowadays, and you better have some people who are guiding you well to kind of know what the ins and outs are of everything, because it's just a lot of change for everybody involved.
Well, we're not going to be able to take a break here because we have Brandon Marcelo. That's good stuff from Ross Dellinger. Glad we brought that up. Now, in the chat room, Southwest Airlines, which I love using Southwest Airlines. I love flying out of Love Field in Dallas, although when we went to Vegas, we flew out of Austin. A little bit of a different type airport, but very convenient. Jim Solomon had this, and Southwest they claim that 80% of their customers want assigned seating. And John goes, who are these people being surveyed to get that data? Southwest wants, or am I missing something? One of the main reasons I've flown Southwest is to choose my seat. Part of it's the 2 bags fly free, but also the fact you get A, B, or C, boarding 1 through 60, whatever it is, and you can upgrade if you want to get A1 through A15. Garrett, your thoughts about, does it matter to you? Do you care either way?
I mean, for me, I really don't care. Like, I think it's what made them unique. It's what made them special. So it sucks to kind of see that going by the wayside, but that's kind of like the trend with everything in this country right now. But at the same time, it really doesn't matter. Like, if I'm going to get on a plane and go somewhere, as long as I have a seat, I'm good at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that kind of takes on a life of its own on social media, and I've seen some of the talk about that, and I see a very clear delineation in the comments. There's people who fly all the time that this is going to matter much more to than people like myself or Garrett who barely ever fly at all. Like, I mean, I like the convenience if I was in the A group for Southwest.
Sure.
If I was in the C group, it made no difference whatsoever because I was absolutely going to get screwed on wherever I was having a place to sit. So, the days when I had A grouping, yeah, Southwest rules were awesome. The days when I didn't, kind of sucked, But, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a really strong, that's not life-changing for me. If you travel a lot, I can see where it is. But I don't fly often enough to really feel like this is going to make a huge difference for me. I do like Southwest. I did like that. But I don't know the other side of it and whether or not it's going to really make that big of a difference when I travel any longer.
Some of the responses, J.G. Nielardo, the 2 bags flying free was genius, simple, lucrative, moved by Southwest. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that totally.
Will nail you with that.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's definitely something I liked.
JG, check bags is just inconvenient, increases risk of loss for the customer. I like to do the curbside check-in with my bags, but that's fine. Josh, I haven't flown in years. Kim Coulter, nope, I'll be damned. I'm a snob. I want my first class seat, 2.7 miles. I paid for and I earned it.
Well, I think you'll still be able to pay for your first class seat. I think also the people will be paying a little extra to get the better seats now rather than, hey, you got the A group and you get to get wherever the seats are open as soon as you walk on the plane. Now you'll get that seat you wanted, but you're just going to have to pay more for it. So that's like everything else that, works business-wise.
Jayhawk Champ, isn't it as much where you sit? It isn't as much where you sit as much as where you put your bag. Dustin, I would say as long as it's not first class, first come, first serve, it's always been that. I get what you're saying. It depends on when you arrive to the airport and check in. Choose your seating online beforehand is the epitome of freedom, as it is the TSA pre-check. I don't know. I need to get you, and I need to get whoever doesn't have TSA pre-check. It is phenomenal. I remember checking in, I think, at Vegas, and I walked in, there's like 8 people in front of me, where you might have dozens and dozens and dozens of people in line if you don't have that. Kyle Visser, Smokey, I hate it. They are ruining a best budget air travel.
Yeah, again, that's probably, if I traveled more often, I'd have a stronger opinion on it. But, I mean, if you do and you tell me it's a bad thing, I mean, I'm inclined to just be open-minded about it. It didn't register with me as being bad or good, just different. I kind of initially leaned bad, just initially. But, yeah, I'll trust those who travel far more often. And I'd have TSA, that fast pass or pre-pass, whatever, but you and Paul went and did that on your own one day. I just sat back and did the show at the studio that day. So
I think you were on the air during your shift during that day. Let me see here. Southwest ruined a good thing. I'm not flying with them anymore. Kyle, I hate it. There's another one. Free-range seating is Southwest Airlines' strongest selling point. I remember early 80s, you could fly to Phoenix, San Diego for dirt cheap. And in Phoenix, those Southwest Airlines TV ads ran $247. Smokey, get clear. Too damn many people now know the TSA, what he calls scam. The TSA is just a violation of the Fourth Amendment. I'm not sure what that means. We went up to Dallas. We registered, and a few weeks later, we had the TSA pre-check number, and it does save me some time. Couple more of these. Phoenix is Southwest's second home. Phoenix was the number 2 hub that helped Southwest Airlines go viral. Of course, Dallas and Love Field is a big deal. We're TSA and clear. Waltz right wherever we want. Wait is not the long TSA line. I think TSA pre-check, from what I have, has always been very, very convenient. All right, thanks for the feedback. We appreciate it for what you gave us in the chat room. When we come back, Brandon Marcelo, 247 Sports. He's another one that has been all over the place when it comes to college football media days, and also has a great story on Michigan running back Edwards and what he does every day to remind himself of his mother who passed away. That story and more. This is 365 Sports. Let the deals continue at Allen Samuels in Waco during the Make This the Summer event with hot deals. The 2024 Dodge Hornet RT, $4,000 down, puts you in a 2-year low-mileage lease for $245 a month, or a 2024 Fiat 500e fully battery-operated vehicle, $4,000 down, puts you in a 2-year lease for $245 a month. If it's luxury you want, Allen Samuels has that as well. Come and drive the sleeky, spacious Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer. We
drove one of those during our Big 12 media coverage in Las Vegas. It's amazing. Over 20 vehicles in stock available for immediate delivery. Don't want a full-sized SUV? Well, come get the best-selling SUV in the history of automobiles with the Grand Cherokees. Over 40 in stock. You're bound to find one for you. Get your low monthly payment vehicles, large, luxurious, and mid-sized SUVs. Don't forget about Ram trucks. They have half-tons and all-tons, some with 2.9% financing for 72 months. They also have a great selection of the famous heavy-duty 2500 and 3500 models. Also qualified for no payments for 90 days. Come see what they have. Alan Samuels, Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat Loop 340 east of 84 in Waco.
Automatic Chef Canteen is a full-service micro-market vending and office coffee provider with state-of-the-art vending equipment, a wide variety of products, and offering custom-fitted micro-market vending office coffee solutions for your employee break room. You want a full break room solution and a workplace oasis? Well, Automatic Chef Canteen, locally owned and operated for over 50 years in Central Texas, also includes in-house mechanics on call 24/7 for fast, reliable service and maintenance. Automatic Chef Canteen, 6900 Imperial Drive in Waco, or online at automaticchefcanteen.com.
Our good friend Brad Boozer, Boozer's Jewelers here at 365 Sports. Now, Brad, people who watch and listen to our show know I'm a double-time customer for you, engagement ring and wedding band, and you guys do that great, but that's not all you do at Boozer's Jewelers.
Absolutely, and I always like to say, it's a new year. It's a great way to start the year out. Go through your old jewelry. Go through your wife's jewelry box. Go through anything you're maybe not wearing, something that's broken, something that you're not using. We do a massive amount of custom work. We can take your old jewelry, old diamonds, old watches, and we can convert it into something special for you and make a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. And if that's not something you're interested in, a great thing is we can turn that into cash. So we buy gold, we buy diamonds, we'll buy Rolex watches, any kind of heirloom jewelry, anything that's maybe passed down to you.
Boozer's Jewelers, where do they find you, Brad?
We're at 1025 North Valley Mills Drive, right on the corner of Lake Air Drive and Valley Mills with the big clock on the corner.
Bambi SQ, what is the number one reason or two or three reasons, Bambi, that people should contact House of Travel?
As a travel agency local here in Waco, we can take care of all your bookings, your payments, answer your questions, help you when there are issues or problems, things that may come up that you don't know what to do or how to fix them. People don't realize we don't charge a fee for what we do. It doesn't cost you extra to use a travel agent. We're just here. We get paid by the tour companies and the cruise lines to represent them. But you have an expert on your side that's here and local, and you have a name and a face to put together to help you with anything that you may need. Give us a call. We can price things for you. We can help you answer questions. We can make it simple, easy, and one stop.
Your knowledge of all the years you've done this and then spit it back to them or give them options?
It helps us to kind of know a date range, a budget, what your goals are and what you want to see and do on your vacation. And then that helps us to know what to look for, and we can narrow down and help you make the best choices for your vacation so you get the best value, you get exactly what you were hoping for, and making sure that it's taken care of with a carefree, easy, simple for you type vacation. I've been doing this for over 40 years. Every day I learn something new. I experience new situations and things that I can help take care of for people, whether it's just making sure you get the best deals and find the best vacations, or whether it's to solve that problem like you've got a flight that's being canceled and you don't know what to do. There's weather coming up, or should I cancel my trip next week because of the hurricane? Those are things that we take care of and you don't have to worry about. You've got somebody that you can rely on that you know is an expert, knows what we're doing, have been doing this for a long time, so that you're not questioning, okay, does the person on the other end of the phone really understand what I'm asking or know how to find those deals? You've got an expert, and we are here to take care of that.
For more information, go to houseoftravelwaco.com.
This is 365 Sports.
The Sikkim 365 app is brought to you by Alan Samuels Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat. Come by, let's be friends.
Brandon Marcelo, always very gracious whenever I blow up his phone about a segment. We appreciate his time. It's been a busy stretch for him. Brandon, all these media days are now winding down. Was there one or two of anything said or a story from any of the ones that you attended, which I'm sure were quite a bit, that came to mind to you the most?
Not really. It's talking season, and I'm ready for the talking to stop, man. I'm ready to hit into some practices. I want to hear about depth charts, what's going on in those practices, and of course kick the ball off. I hate to say that, but I'm not a blowhard, you know what I mean? A lot of media go in there and we go, wow, this is an interesting story. No, it's not. Everybody's just talking out their ass. Let's get the ball let's get the ball kicked off.
God,
man.
I love what you just said. That's a great response. Brandon Marcelo with his 247 Sports.
Brandon, I see that you've been tweeting a little bit about the House agreement that I guess was filed officially today, and I know that everybody's pouring through and trying to figure out the details of this. My, I guess, just main and perhaps only question on it is, what do you make of the scholarship increases, particularly in football? I don't know quite how to feel about it because I don't quite understand what it's going to look like on the other side, having the additional 20 scholarships. So what are your kind of early thoughts on what exactly this means for football to go from 85 to 105?
Yeah, well, really the bigger thing here to me is that we're shrinking roster sizes for football from, 125 or 130 down to 105. And that, for that matter, schools at their own discretion can provide 105 scholarships, or they could do 20, or they could do 85 like they do now, and then technically still have 20 walk-ons. But the limit's been shrunk. Your roster will be 105, and that's what coaches and administrators are most upset about. It's not necessarily spending more money potentially on up to 105 scholarships. It's eliminating walk-ons and guys that can walk on and be part of the team that are beyond the 105. So to me, what's going to be most interesting is, listen, these schools are all going to have 105 scholarship players. I don't see anybody skimming on that on the Power 5 level. But in talking to administrators this last week, when the numbers started leaking about baseball and softball roster sizes, they're looking at the possibility of having funding up to 34 scholarships for baseball instead of the equivalency that used to be 11.7, which they would separate out among like 20-something players. So now they could do up to 34, right? Well, I've talked to some Power 5 administrators that say they're just not going to be able to afford that. They're not going to give 34 scholarships out to baseball. It's going to be lower than that. So what this does is, yes, it increases the possibility for scholarships in all sports, but also these are not going to be full head count scholarships like you see in football now. It's going to be equivalency scholarships. So, for example, if a football program only wants to give out maybe 90 scholarships, right?
Right.
Well, they don't have to give everybody a full scholarship. They can give someone a 40% scholarship ride and then give someone else a 60% scholarship ride. That would help, alleviate some concerns there about having 20-something players as walk-ons. But the long and short of it is, when it comes to football, most, if not all, those Power 5 conference teams are going to end up giving scholarships to all 105 instead of, splitting out a certain number that's lower than that.
And baseball's been splitting out there at 11.7. I know they get up to 34 now. But isn't that kind of what baseball has been doing for as long as I can remember?
Yep. But that number, of course, was 11.7, as you mentioned,
right.
Which a lot of schools, I know at least in the SEC, they complained a lot about that because they're more than willing to pay for more scholarships because they were kind of an uneven playing field against, believe it or not, Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, because of some academic scholarships and stuff like that, were able to put more players on the baseball team on scholarship. Meanwhile, other schools were not. So Vanderbilt was able to swoop in on some big-time recruits in baseball and steal them away from the likes of LSU or Mississippi State or South Carolina because they were able to give them full scholarships, whereas some of these other schools were limited to 11.7. Well, that's being done away with now, and everybody's going to be kind of on an even playing field. But as I said, not every power program is going to be able to fund 35 scholarships for baseball and also 34 for softball as well.
Yeah, I think it might have been Ross Dellinger put out a chart, and Brandon, they're going from, I think it was in total, if you had every single sport, like 500, and now I'm forgetting 500 something to an additional 700 something. So more than double. And yeah, it's hard to believe that anybody will max out on that, but that's just crazy how much that's going to change things.
Yeah, and remember, not all schools have 20-something athletics programs in their schools, and that's why in a lot of examples, and some of these power administrators saying, you would be smart to be an administrator right now to not go out there and say, hey, we're not going to eliminate any sports. I can promise you that, because they're still crunching these numbers, and they're going to go through this in the next few years. And unless there's some new revenue streams that come up to help alleviate some of these concerns, there's some issues to be worked out there to keep all the sports afloat.
All right, so football and men's basketball are the ones who get the biggest checks from the back pay. Is that right? Is there any question about that? Is it a massive difference?
Yeah, we're looking at what would have been reported. I think it was about 90% of the deal would be going out to football and men's basketball players, and then separate from that was women's basketball with a higher percentage, which I believe is about 5%, and then the rest was kind of differentiated out among the other sports. So a lot of that stuff's going to be kind of in the finer print or whatever, which of course gives a lot of people thoughts of, well, when it comes to the future payments for current athletes, can we follow that structure, that blueprint? Well, that's when Title IX comes in the situation here, and that's all going to have to be hammered out school by school is the belief, not necessarily in a wide-ranging thing from the NCAA level, unless, of course, Congress steps in and is able to codify some of this and say, hey, it's not against Title IX rules, and it's fine if you give, say, 75% of your revenue of this 22% out to football players. But that seems to be a long and far-fetched dream at this point. And you know, in the interim, it certainly looks like this is going to be school-by-school decisions inside their states and according to their state laws.
Brandon, like you said, it's talking season. There have been some, just interesting moments like Deshaun Foster's awkward presser. Lincoln Riley had some things to say that a lot of people went crazy over. What did you think about Jim Phillips and the way he just sort of set the tone at ACC Media Days? And obviously there's still a lot to play out as far as that whole entire story goes. But what did you think? Because it at least seemed to just kind of quiet down the talk, if anything, the following days.
Well, as he said, they're going to fight in court until their last breath against Florida State and Clemson to keep them in that conference. But that doesn't quiet down what's actually happening behind the scenes. And there's been other talk about the Big Ten, the SEC not being interested in Florida State and Clemson. Well, yeah, they're not interested right now because they don't want to get involved in litigation and everything. They want to see how this all gets settled out before they even start thinking about potentially expanding or adding one or both of those programs. So yeah, Jim Phillips, of course, had to come out and be a little bit more aggressive out there. He's been kind of criticized in the past couple of years throughout all of this, throughout expansion and realignment, for kind of being too nice and playing too nice. So he needed to do that. But still, there's turmoil in backstage there. We did a big article earlier this week at the kickoff of ACC Media Days about how there's some strife among administrators and coaches about their media situation in the ACC, and not necessarily how much they're getting paid, but how the ACC is being portrayed in the media, not just on the other networks, but on their own network, the ACC network. They're upset with not having a quote-unquote Paul Feinbaum of their own to kind of a weaponized voice that would protect and kind of portray the ACC as stronger than it is right now. And for that matter, there's conversations about how ESPN covers the ACC. So, for example, Selection Sunday on the college football playoff, they had 11 analysts and hosts on there that had backgrounds in all the other power conferences, but there was missing one voice, the ACC. And meanwhile, they own the ACC network with a bunch of personalities and analysts. They didn't have them on the show. And in fact, one of those analysts was just down the hall in Bristol, Connecticut, while that 2-hour show was on, and they didn't bring him on. So it's a lot of really some concerns there in the ACC, just how ESPN's treating them, and for that matter, how they're being portrayed in the media themselves with their own media partner.
Yeah, no, that is very, very interesting, and I've seen a lot of guys kind of throw. I'll be the Feinbaum of the ACC. No, but you've grown up around college football and especially the South, and you've seen kind of how all that works. It's not a simple, like, Feinbaum's just kind of unique in his own right, is he not? Like, I'm not always the biggest fan necessarily, and I do think the propaganda can kind of go overboard, but I don't think you can just say, like, hey, Brandon Marcelo, do what Feinbaum does, but for the ACC.
No, you can't. And in fact, if there was another Feinbaum out there, they would have popped up in SEC country because, listen, there's no fan bases in the country that are more fervent and crazy than SEC fans. And Paul Feinbaum was in the heart of it and was a well-respected firebomb of a journalist in the state of Alabama as a writer and reporter. And then, of course, as a columnist later and did the radio show. And so there's really no one else out there that would really kind of tap into the formula there in the SEC. And if you're going to try and replicate that in the ACC, do you think, Syracuse football fans are going to get riled up? Do you think a Syracuse football fan is going to go poison Toomer's Oaks at Auburn and then call the radio show and brag about it like Harvey Updike did on Paul Feinbaum's show years ago? It's a much different temperament in the SEC. And for that matter, Paul Feinbaum let the fans speak. He gave them a forum, but also Feinbaum's got a lot of connections throughout the SEC, had his finger on the pulse and wasn't afraid to kind of, shout from the rooftops things he thought. I mean, he called out coaches all the time in newspaper and in print, and of course continues to do so on the SEC network, which again, the ACC just doesn't allow. They kind of tiptoe the issues there, and that's something that a lot of people think has to change. But for example, we had sources telling us that Dabo Swinney a couple of years ago said, "Hey, we need our own Paul Feinbaum." But my question is do you really, Dabo? Because the last 2-3 years, if you had a Paul Feinbaum on your network,
oh yeah,
they'd be telling you right now that you might be one of the worst coaches in the ACC. You're not adapting to the times in the transfer portal, and that you're past your prime and it's time to move on from Dabo Swinney. I don't think Dabo would have loved hearing that based off his reactions from the very light criticism he gets from his own ACC media now.
All right, Brandon, want you to have a great weekend. Your story today, Donovan Edwards, his mother, Donna, your thoughts, kind of tell everybody about the story. Here's how it's set up. Before she died, Donna Edwards gave her husband 3 commands as he embarked on becoming a single parent. Take the kids to church, get an education, make the kids play sports. And Donovan Edwards now carrying out his mom's name as the face of Michigan football.
Yeah, Donovan Edwards is a guy that he, as he even describes, was arrogant, even up to a year ago as a player. Has been a backup, exploded on the scene in the national championship game, as a lot of us saw. And now that Blake Corum's gone, and a lot of those starters, 17 starters from that national championship team, he's the guy. He's on the cover of VA Sports College Football, and now he's the face of Michigan football. And he says he's ready to take that on after going through a heck of a lot throughout his childhood, losing his mother, doesn't even remember his mother because he was 2 years old, and being raised in a single-parent home, and his dad, in the summer months, going to Boston to go to school and allowing the kids have to be raised by his in-laws while he did that, and then would come back during the year and work and continue studying. It's quite the story. And I'll tell you what, Big Ten has some good stories there. You mentioned Deshaun Foster. When he had his big-time gaffe there, his flub. We followed him around throughout the day after that and kind of peeled back the curtain a little bit on why Deshaun Foster did what he did and what kind of guy he is. Some interesting stuff from him off to the side there. So, yeah, go check all that out. I appreciate it over at cbssports.com.
No, it's a great story. Thank you for your time, Brandon. We appreciate your access when we get it, and always want to get you on whenever we can. Have a great weekend, sir.
All right, no problem. You too.
You too. Brandon Marcelo, good stuff on the House versus NCAA. Now that a lot of that information's out, you can see, like Craig broke down the scholarships. You can see what an average player, football or men's basketball, is expecting to perhaps get in back pay, and down to any of the athletes, depending on whatever sport it might be. All right, coming up next, earlier this week, I had a chance to visit with Phil Steele from Phil Steele's Summer College Football Magazine. It is juicy, loaded with college football porn. We'll have that, also Paul's Top 5, Craig Smoke, David Smoke, Garrett Ross inside the studio, and this is 365 Sports. TexasBeefHouse.com. They also are a sponsor of Paul's Top 5, a company founded back in 2017. The story goes way back before then, though. After a decade of selling whole and half beef to friends, Aaron Duvall, George Duvall, saw the demand for a high-quality product to be bought and also brought to the market. He and Tyler worked for years to obtain genetics needing to bring the best quality beef to the market, and that's what Texas Beef House was born, and also what they've become just outside of Tyler, Texas. Also, they provide affordable farm-raised beef from their pasture to you, to your plate. They have an auction coming up August the 7th and 8th. Live auctions, they do those once and sometimes twice a month. And you can go to TexasBeefHouse.com. A box will pop up for Bid on Beef. They have the catalog and all the information about the live online auction. It is really amazing. It's scintillating if you want to get, like I know some of you even shared the story of trying to buy some big, massive tomahawk ribeyes like I did, and then you lose out in the end, but you have a chance. And here's the key. 1, marbled, delicious, absolutely mouth-watering steaks, beef. Secondly, you pay what you want to pay for whatever cut of beef you want. It's not what's on a label when you go inside the grocery store. TexasBeefOutz.com, premium quality Angus and Wagyu beef for sale online August 7th and 8th. TexasBeefOutz.com.
Celebrate American quality and value during the Red, White, and Blue sales tag event at Richard Carr. Drive the best. Get professional-grade power and first-class interior in a GMC Sierra. Qualified buyers save $9,000 on all 2024 GMC Sierra SLT models in stock with qualified trade-in. Military and first responders save an extra $500. Plus, find Red, White, and Blue savings tags on vehicles all over the lot. Drive home American quality and value during our Red, White, and Blue sales tag event at Richard Carr GMC.
Richard Carr. They have the truck for you.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one. Commercial, farm and ranch, or residential, Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm. Welcome home.
Parenting is full of surprises.
You never know what to expect.
So after our son was born, I called my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent to set up a life insurance policy in case something happened to me.
Sawyer is now 2.
And we'll soon have a sister. There's no one else I would trust with protecting my family.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Baylor alumni are more than 160,000 strong. When we all join hands to support our university, we don't just move the needle, we move mountains. Working together, we create life-changing opportunities for students on the field, in the classroom, in the laboratory, and in life for generations to come. So get connected, get involved. Learn how at baylor.edu/alumni.
Let the journey to financial brilliance begin with Genco's limited time offers. Max your earnings with a Kasasa cash account and get paid monthly with a 4.25 APY. That's $425 annually. Then invest in a 13-month share certificate and earn 4.9 APY. That's $529. Earn cash and outshine the rest. At Genco, we offer you the sun and the moon. Kasasa based on average daily balance of $10,000. Certificate based on $10,000 investment. See GencoFCU.org for details. NCUA.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 5 o'clock hour is sponsored by Edward Jones Investments with financial advisor Ben Erlinson, who'll navigate you through today's financial climate. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now here's David Smoke and Craig Smoke.
We are joined by the great Phil Steele. Phil Steele's College Football Magazine, an annual, right? It is the Bible of college football. I think it's safe to say that. Phil, thanks for your time. So I always, since all of the changes in technology, how much more of a challenge is it, even with all of your sources and references, etc., is it more of a challenge to produce the magazine now than ever before because of the changes in transfer portal, etc.?
Yeah, the transfer portal has definitely made it tougher. In fact, David, this year we went to the press and sent the magazine, the final page of the press on June 7th. We used to be able to go to the press in the middle of May. I mean, you know, the spring practices were over. I got to talk to all the coaches. We knew the rosters. Boom, it's gone. This year, the portal closed on April 30th. And, you know, we knew all the players that had entered the portal, but now where did they land? So we gave it the entire month of May and even the first week of June to find everybody and where they landed landed for each team. I had coaches texting me a couple days before the magazine went to the press saying, hey, we just signed this guy, we just signed that guy. And every time you get a new edition, you got to rewrite the write-up, you got to change the two deep, and a lot of changes. So it's made us go to the press later and made it a lot more hectic at press time.
One of the things that you do with every program is that you look at what they've done either recently, historically, etc. And it's so much. I mean, like if it's Oregon or if it's Troy or whoever it might be, it is loaded. Is it at times like? Do you also think, okay, we need to do this year? How do you find the space to get it all in? And it's also, by the way, very easy to follow and read.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that's made it easy to read is for longtime users of the magazine, you know exactly where to look. You know, who was the starting rusher last year? You could close your eyes and point to the spot on the page where it's at. Hey, I want to know a stat from, who's winning the series matchup. You know where to look. Hey, a score from 3 years ago. Once again, close your eyes. Who's the starting left tackle? You know the exact location. It's the same for all 134 teams. So we take like 134 media guides, cram it into one source, and put all the information in an easy spot. But, the write-ups themselves, what we focus on is three things. First thing is, what kind of shape were they heading into last year? What happened last year? And what kind of shape are they heading into this year? Those are the three questions I want answered, and that's what we do with each of the position write-ups. I may give you a little bit of history in the forecast just because, last year's record is not what the team is necessarily. You have to look at how they've done prior. There was Pitt, for example, had 20 wins the 2 years prior to winning 3 games last year. You can't just look at them as a 3-win team. So there's a lot of different factors that go in, and I try to consolidate it down as much as we can, abbreviate as much as we can, use small type as much as we can, but we get all the information in there.
So how much has it been you watching, and just as an opinion, of the realignment since Texas OU, and of course realignment in Arkansas to the SEC many years ago, among others, Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, A&M. They are all left, but there's been a slew of it, and it's exploded, and the college football passion of like, what's the next move? But your thoughts about Texas OU, the Pac-12 and Big Ten, the Pac-12 and the ACC, SMU in the ACC, and the Pac-12 and the Big 12.
Yeah, a lot of changes. And the first thing I want to say, David, is I'm remorse in the fact that there's no more Pac-12. And ironically, the Pac-12 had arguably its best season in the last 15 years last year. They had legitimate, title prospects and playoff caliber teams. And unfortunately, the Pac-12 has gone by the wayside. I don't like the fact that the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, has 2 teams from the West Coast and 1 from Texas. I always liked regionality in college sports, but as you mentioned, the first year of the magazine, 1995, was also the last year of the Southwest Conference, and college football survived, and it'll continue to survive and thrive. I think some teams will benefit from the move. You take a look at like Oregon going into the Big Ten. I think they contend for the title right away. Some teams are going to struggle. UCLA faced an easy schedule last year, taking on a much tougher schedule this year. Texas and Oklahoma, I think, are both primed and ready to go to the SEC, but Oklahoma faces a killer schedule. They play the toughest schedule of any team in the SEC this year. Texas, on the other hand, plays one of the easier schedules, and that's why they're my pick to get to the conference title game. So it's going to be fascinating watching all these teams blend in.
Who among, obviously Utah with Coach Whittingham and what he's done, Colorado with Dion and what they're trying to do. Arizona was really good last year with the coaching change, but they do maintain Fafita at quarterback. Is it Utah, Arizona, Colorado, Arizona State that in order might be ready for the Big 12?
I think only 2 of them are really ready for the Big 12, and that's Utah and Arizona. Utah is my number 1 surprise team in the country. I think they have a season more like they did in 2021 and 2022 when they won the Pac-12 both years. Cam Rising is back at the quarterback spot. Remember last year, it was sort of nondescript in August when Brandon Rose, the backup quarterback, went down. But then when Rising didn't play, they're down to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th string quarterback at times during the course of the year, and teams could stack the line on down. They also, as I mentioned, played in the rugged Pac-12 last year, which in my mind was equal with the Big Ten and the SEC. And they also had to play most of the top teams on the road in Oregon State, USC, Washington, Arizona. This year they get most of the tough teams at home in Rice-Eccles, where they've only lost twice in the last 5 years. They get Cam Rising back. They also have their backup quarterback, Brandon Rose, back, Sam Hurd back, so they're better at quarterback, strong at the line of scrimmage. I think Utah is my pick to win the Big 12. And the other team that would contend is Arizona. And I think had Arizona not lost its head coach and lost a bunch of players to the portal, they may be the preseason favorite to win the Big 12. But I like the hire of Brent Brennan. I like the fact that Fafita and McMillan both stayed. They've got a veteran offensive line and a good defensive back seven. I think Arizona will contend this year as well. Colorado, Arizona State, I think both teams have losing seasons this year.
All right, so we know that Kansas State has high expectations. They allowed Howard to move to Ohio State because they love what they have with Avery Johnson. Obviously, with what Kansas has with Jalen Daniels, if he's healthy. Then you have Oklahoma State, the steady Eddie with Mike Gundy, among a few others. Your thoughts about the Big 12? It seemed like there's a bunch of teams that are like packed or stacked in the middle that one or two might make a run, but your thoughts about the Big 12?
Yeah, I think in the Big 12, you've got 10, 11 teams that have a legitimate shot contending to be in that Big 12 title game. You know, you touched on Kansas State, Avery Johnson taking over at QB. He would have won the starting job over Will Howard, and K-State's been playing quite well, and they've got a good schedule this year. Oklahoma State's number one on my experience chart, and this after last year being inexperienced at number 115. So a much more veteran team, 19 returning starters. They've got the running back, Ollie Gordon back, who won the Doak Walker Award last year, and a veteran defense. One team to really keep your eyes on, David, is Iowa State. Going over the team with Coach Campbell this year, a lot of the positions, in fact, almost every position, he said, you know, Phil, this is either the deepest, the most experienced, or the best that we've been at this position since I got here at Iowa State. I think it's much like 2021 when they had a lot of talent returning, but we're picked number 7 in the preseason poll, so maybe those expectations were too high and weighted on them a little bit. Now they're under the radar where Matt Campbell does his best work, and he's got a heck of a team. I think they're a clear-cut threat. Arizona, as I mentioned, West Virginia with Neil Brown, they've got the run game. They've got a quarterback that can run in Garrett Green. They've got the running backs with White and Donaldson, one of the top offensive lines, and the defense played pretty good last year. TCU just 2 years ago was in the national title game, and Sonny Dykes took a step back last year, but now they've got 16 returning starters, including Hoover and Seals at quarterback. Watch out for them. Kansas, as you touched on, David, if Jalen Daniels stays healthy, they're a threat. UCF brought in a ton of transfers. Absolutely. And they've got KJ Jefferson, who Gus Malzahn compares to Cam Newton. So they're a threat. Texas Tech, Joey McGuire's doing a heck of a job there. He's got probably his most veteran and best team in his third year when coaches usually hit their stride. He's got Morton back at quarterback, Taj Brooks at running back, and even Baylor with Dave Aranda. I never discount Dave Aranda because to me he's one of the defensive minds in college football. He's taken over the defensive play calling this year, also shifting up the offense to more of the spread attack. Had a really good conversation with Coach Aranda, and I think Baylor's even a threat this year.
Well, and you know this recruiting of now, which of course is more for 2025. They have jumped head in. They have finally kind of gotten the NIL act together. They were more active in the transfer portal with DeQuan Finn coming in from Toledo to compete with Sawyer Robertson. And then there's also the addition even of Gary Patterson as an analyst. He's a defensive mind like Aranda. That's like you go into a room and talk defense with them, you come out of there like your head swirling. How much of an impact do you think an analyst like Patterson can have?
Oh, huge. I've been a big Gary Patterson fan forever. The job he did at TCU was remarkable. And, man, like you mentioned, those two defensive ends, like Fisher against Spassky, you know, in the chess championship. You've got two of the elite defensive minds out there coming up with a defense. And, you know, the one thing Coach Aranda told me is that, you know, in the past couple of years, they haven't really faced this pure spread offense in practice that much. And he feels feels that by facing it now on offense, which they've changed up this year with Spavital coming in, that's going to help the defense as well. So, and I like the talent. DeQuan Finn is a guy who's 6'2", 204 at the quarterback position. Love what he did at Toledo. And I think in this new offense, Richard Reese, a lot of folks, including myself at the end of the year, after Reese had those 2 touchdowns late in the year on the kick returns, are like, why are we not getting the ball in Richard Reese's hands? Coach Aranda told me that this offense will get the ball in his hands in more wide open spaces. He could be a major factor this year, so I'm pretty pumped about Baylor.
Well, when he did return those kicks against West Virginia in the last game, I put out on Twitter, so I'm glad you said that. I was like, it makes you wonder why he hasn't had more touches at the running back position. It was a weird. Last year was so bizarre just throughout. So SMU, we've had Rhett Lashley, we had Elijah Roberts, a heck of a defensive lineman for them. They're now a part of the ACC. They have been waiting their time. It was almost like they were in college football prison for a while with all the things that they went through. But your thoughts about what Lashley at SMU and entering the ACC, and I think they're not just entering to be happy, but they feel like they can make a dent inside that conference.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with that statement. In fact, a lot of folks throw out, hey, last year four teams entered the Big 12, and none of them really had great success. Only UCF made a bowl game, and they had lost their bowl game and finished 6-7. So anytime you step up from the Group of 5 to the Power 4, you're going to struggle. But this SMU team is not one of those 4 teams. I felt Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU were all in rebuilding years last year. UCF was the only team that had a modicum of experience coming back, and they made a bowl game. With SMU, they're number 7 on my experience chart. They've got the quarterback in Preston Stone. They've got a backup in Kevin Jennings. Wasn't it interesting to see both of them at the ACC media days?
I thought so, too. Yeah.
Yeah, who takes 2 quarterbacks? But they did. And then you look at the running backs. They got Knighton, they got Johnson, they got Wheaton, and then they got Brashard Smith coming in from Miami of Florida. That's a loaded backfield. They've got dangerous receivers, a veteran offensive line. And last year, they didn't just win games. I mean, to go 11-3 is nice, but they won their games. Or their average score last year was 39-18. They won or were plus 21 points per game last year. Now, granted, they're taking on better competition. And granted, last year they played Oklahoma and lost. They played TCU and lost, and they played Boston College and lost. So they played 3 Power 4 teams and lost to them all last year. None were blowouts, and I think this SMU team is very talented. I think they're going to be an ACC contender in their first year.
How much pressure on Ryan Day with Chip Kelly and his offensive coordinator, who yesterday he said that he would trust him with his life, but we know with what Michigan's done, even with Harbaugh leaving, do you feel like maybe, even though there's some coaches on the so-called hot seat, is the pressure on Ryan Day to win this year?
Oh, absolutely. And now I have heard national championship or bust. I'm not buying that. I think if Ryan Day beats Michigan, gets to the playoff, wins a game or 2, he's good. But lose to Michigan, you better win the national title. If he loses to Michigan, he's got to win the national title or he'll be gone. There's no way an Ohio State coach can lose to Michigan 4 straight years. But look at the talent. And, he's got Michigan to thank for this year's squad. And I say that because they usually lose like 10 players to the NFL draft, right? Well, this year only 4 guys left for the NFL. A whole bunch that could have left. JT Tuimoloau at defensive line, Hamilton, Sawyer, a whole handful of guys could have left for the NFL, but they didn't want to leave without beating Michigan or without winning the Big Ten. So they came back, and then I love the transfers that he brought in, like Caleb Downs from Alabama.
Absolutely.
They bring in Quinshon Judkins from Mississippi, a running back, Seth McLaughlin on the offensive line. So this is really a team that is poised. I cannot see him slipping up against Michigan. I got him a double-digit favorite in that game. But if for some reason Ryan Day lost to Michigan this year, he would be on the hot seat.
So in the Big Ten, you brought up Oregon earlier. They're ready to compete right away for the Big Ten championship. We just mentioned Ohio State. Michigan, of course, in transition with Harbaugh gone, and they had such a great team, senior team. Where is Penn State? They always are around, but it's hard for James Franklin and the Nittany Lions to break through.
Yeah, and they've been stuck in that East Division behind Ohio State and Michigan, and every year they seem to lose to Ohio State and Michigan when those two are in the top 5 in the polls. And some of the games most of the games have actually been fairly close. Now this year, there's no more East Division, and they avoid Michigan, they avoid Oregon, and they avoid Iowa. So the only real big boy they play is Ohio State, and they get them at home. I actually have Penn State favored in 11 of their games this year. They have a talented quarterback in Drew Allar, who had a 25-2 ratio last year. They've got talented running backs with Singleton and Allen. The offensive line looks good. The receiving core is the big question mark, but they've got some talent there. Defense is strong across the board, and the special teams are good. And like I said, with the schedule, I think this is a playoff team. I have number 5 coming into the season.
Well, I have to ask you about former Baylor and Temple coach and a great friend of the show in Matt Rule. Nebraska has been really not very good at all, and they lose close games all the time. He's now in year 2, which he's always been able to take a team to the next level and takes over teams that are so like dysfunctional. Your thoughts about the Huskers with a freshman quarterback in Raiola?
Yeah, and can you believe the last time Nebraska was in a bowl game was 2016?
Yeah, it breaks my heart.
7 years.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong Huskers fan. It's breaking. I know it's been it's like they had a 38 or 40-year run of a bowl game, and now they can't get back to one.
Well, they're getting one this year. You don't have to worry about that, David. And I'll tell you one thing. In my magazine, I have a lot of metrics. And most of these metrics are 75 to 80% of the time this happens. Generally, teams that have that amount of close losses the next year have an improved record and don't have those close losses. Nebraska's been in that outlier category, that 15% of the time category, because it just continue to have close losses. But what we've learned is that Matt Rule in this second year takes those close losses and turns them into close wins, has had the increase in record by about 5 games per season. In fact, when I talked to Coach Rule this year, I said, hey, your team's average improved by about 5 games in the second season, so you're calling for 10 wins, right? And he said, those are your words, Phil, not mine. But when you look at Nebraska closer, they should really open up 6-0 this year, perhaps even 7-0. The schedule gets tougher later in the year. But wouldn't that be nice to wrap up a bowl in the first half of the season and then just be playing with house money in the second half of the year? They're my number 2 most improved team in the country. And the key is going to be not only were the close losses there, but how about the turnovers? Last year they were minus 17 in turnovers. Mm-hmm. And the first magazine I put out in 1995, I did an article, Turnovers Equals Turnaround. Once again, 80% of the time teams improve their record. Nebraska will make a bowl game this year, and I think they have it clinched by midseason.
All right, so there's a lot. Phil Steele, by the way. Phil Steele's a college football magazine, annually the Bible of college football that comes out every summer, and we got ours in the mail a few weeks ago. It's amazing, just crammed with information. It's also easy to manage and like you said, guide yourself through each team or each conference or each specific section. So we know there's drama in the ACC. We touched on SMU. You brought up, the Atlantic Coast Conference with Cal and Stanford involved. But Florida State, after what they had last year, and then, of course, disappointed they weren't invited. The injuries tore them up. Clemson with Dabo needing to get back to a certain level. Miami's trying to figure it out. Your thoughts about the ACC? Is it Clemson, Florida State, and everyone else, or is North Carolina? Is it North Carolina State? Is Miami? Are they a part of that mix too?
Yeah, I've got 3 teams tied for first in the ACC in my magazine. And by the way, people say, hey, you're picking ties. Well, guess what? There are 17 teams in the ACC, and there's only 9 possible outcomes. So you're going to have at least 8 ties in conference play, for crying out loud, if not more. Probably more, because you're not going to get an 0-9, 0-8 team, or most likely an 8-0 team. So yeah, a lot of ties. But anyway, I'll talk about those 3 in a minute. But I do want to say that the 2 teams that have the best schedule in the conference are North Carolina and North Carolina State. They avoid most of the big boys. In fact, the only big boy that NC State plays is Clemson. They don't play Miami, Virginia Tech, SMU, or Florida State.
Wow.
North Carolina plays a soft schedule. Virginia Tech plays a soft schedule. They're all players. But the 3 teams I went at the top, Clemson, Miami, and Florida State. Now, Florida State surprised me. It lost a lot of talent from last year, but when I went through the team with Coach Norvell, he said at the end, hey, this may just be his most talented team yet. So I think a lot depends on DJ Uiagalelei. But remember when Jordan Travis went to Florida State, he wasn't really a great passing quarterback. Mike Norvell developed him into one. If he can get that out of DJ Uyunglele this year, this is a dangerous team with a lot of talent, and Norvell hit the transfer portal hard again. Miami of Florida, their offensive line, David, if you get to watch one of their games, they're massive. They average like 6'6", 330 pounds. They are huge. They've got Cam Ward at quarterback. Damian Martinez, they had a weakness at running back out of spring practice. Cristobal goes out and signs Damian Martinez from Oregon State. The defense is loaded with talent, and they've got the best schedule of the top three. In fact, I've got them the highest rated of the three at number 10 in my poll. And then finally, Clemson. And, Dabo Sweeney's getting beat up a lot because he's not utilizing the portal, right? Well, he may have the best chemistry and the best culture of any team. He only lost 2-3 kids out of the two deep to the portal, so he doesn't have to do massive things to bring them in. He's got super recruits across the board. Cade Klubnik, the number one quarterback coming out of high school. Defensive line loaded with studs. Offensive line loaded. A lot of talent on hand. And last year, while they lost 4 games, in those 4 games, they had 94 first downs to 60 for their opponents. Florida State, for example, didn't lead a single second in regulation, needed a 70-yard fumble return for a touchdown just to tie it. And Clemson could easily have beaten a Florida State team that was unbeaten last year. I think all three of those teams are very dangerous in the ACC.
All right, Notre Dame, independent. Obviously, they play an ACC schedule and international schedule, too, with Marcus Freeman. Brian Kelly moved to LSU. Your thoughts about Notre Dame, the Irish, and Marcus Freeman?
I like the fact that they bring in Denbrook as the offensive coordinator this year and Riley Leonard at quarterback. I think that's going to give them a better offense. Defensively, they're loaded. Special teams are there. And this is really the lightest schedule I've seen Notre Dame play in quite some time. It's my number 57 rated schedule. Their toughest game of the year might be game 1 at Texas A&M in College Station. And if they win that one, they're going to be favored in all the rest of their games this year. They get Florida State at home. They do have to play USC on the road, but that's winnable. Very few tough games on the schedule for Notre Dame. I think they clearly make the playoff this year.
All right, Phil Steele with us. Just a couple more minutes. Let's go back to the SEC. Kalen DeBoer's first year at Alabama. Auburn's second year with Hugh Freeze back. Georgia, well, that says everything. LSU trying to figure out a way to do other than, not just score, but also play defense, but their defensive line seems to be vulnerable. What Lane Kiffin's done at Ole Miss. Missouri with Drinkwitz, and on and on. You mentioned the Aggies. How deep is the upper level of the SEC in your opinion?
Yeah, I would take it probably down to Texas A&M. You'd have to include Tennessee in there. You'd have to include Oklahoma in there, and take it down to Texas A&M at that point. I think those teams are all legitimate. I mean, A&M could very well surprise this year if they get the quarterback play. The thing that Mike Elko told me, he said that this might be the best defense that he has coached. Well, heck, just 3 years ago, A&M gave up 15.9 points per game, and he was the defensive coordinator. So if they can keep Connor Wegman healthy, he feels the offensive line is improved. Look out for them. But one team I want to hone in on here, David, is Alabama, because I know when Nick Saban stepped down and they lost a bunch of guys to the portal, I was skeptical. I said, well, maybe a 9-win season. Alabama's clearly going to take a step back. But Kalen DeBoer is 104-12 in his career as a head coach. And I went over the Washington team with him last year, player for player, and I went over the Alabama team with him this year, player for player. And my personal interpretation, he's got more talent at Alabama than he had at Washington. And Washington, he took to the national title game last year. So watch out for Alabama. Going to be better than a lot of folks expect.
Last question. And these teams are going to have a chance because of the extended or expanded college football playoff. But the group of 5, Memphis, UTSA, Boise, what Coach Golish is doing, he's very confident with USF, Liberty, Tulane. Is there somebody that jumps out to you that will probably be the group of 5 representative? And I might have missed somebody, but not on purpose.
Yeah, I'm listing Boise as my pick to get there. I like the defense. I like the quarterback addition they got, bringing in the number 2 rated quarterback in the country out of high school from USC in Malachi Nelson. I think that was huge.
Yep.
I think Memphis is very talented, but here's the thing. Memphis is almost unbeatable in the Liberty Bowl. However, they're under 500 on the road, and they've got to play the next top three teams in the American Conference, all on the road. They play UTSA on the road. They play Tulane on the road and South Florida on the road. That's why I didn't pick Memphis to get there. So I went with Boise, but I think it's a lot of fun. I mean, the thing with this 12-team playoff and one of these group of five getting in, it's wide open. That Texas State UTSA game could be a playoff elimination game, and we've never talked like that in the past, have we, David?
No, we have not, and it's great. The 12 teams, it's going to be interesting. Everyone's already trying to grow that, and let's go through this first year and see how it works out. Phil, you're amazing. The 2024 Phil Steele College Football Preview Magazine is on bookshelves and ready for you. You can go online to buy it as well. Thank you so much, one, for sending me a magazine every summer, but also for the time talking and just digesting so much college football.
Yeah, and it's only available at Barnes & Noble or Books A Million this year, so don't waste your gas driving around for it, or philsteele.com. But, David, I always enjoy our conversations, my friend. Great talking football with you.
You too. Phil Steele, the Bible of college football. This is 365 Sports.
All right, thanks to Phil.
It's time for Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas-raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome back. This is Paul Catalina's Top 25. You wonder, Paul, you haven't been here all day. Yes, I'm in Nashville, but I'm also here. How am I doing it? The Force. That's how I'm doing it. The Force. We're going to continue my preseason top 25. Today, we're going to start with number 20 and move on up to number 16. So let's dive in, shall we? Number 20, Oklahoma. I think this team has potential to be higher than this, but first year in the SEC, gonna be tough. But I do think if you look at what Brent Venables did from his first year to last year, this is gonna be a constantly improving team. 2025 might be the year for the Sooners to really stake their claim at being back as being the Oklahoma that we know. But I do think 20 is about a fair spot for them, if not a little bit higher. But to me right now, 20 is a fair spot for Oklahoma going into the year. Jackson Arnold should be fun to watch, and I do believe you're going to see a much better and more efficient Oklahoma team. They're just in the SEC for the first year, so there's going to be some adjustment period, to put it mildly. Number 19, Miami. Again, this team has a bullet with them. If their offense can be as efficient and amazing as it could be with the wide receivers they have, with Cam Ward, with Damian Martinez, with a gigantic offensive line, this is a team that could really make waves and challenge for the college football playoff. But like everybody else, I got to see it. I got to see them beat the teams that they're not supposed to beat. I got to see them not give up gains to teams that they are beating. That's what I have to see. Hopefully for the Canes, this is a more mature team and one that can be efficient and win games late. I'm looking at you, Mario. Mario, I'm looking at you. Let's go to number 18. LSU. Garrett may say this is too low for LSU, but given what they lost on offense and the fact they've got a new defensive coordinator on defense who I think will improve what was the worst LSU defense we may have ever seen or will ever see, given the fact that you can kind of roll defensive guys out at LSU and they're going to hold you to 21 points or less. But that wasn't the case last year. I think Garrett Nussmeier will be great. I just need to see how they replace Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas specifically and how those guys can produce and if they can get something out of their running backs this year. Something also, Brian Kelly somehow lost the running back train and somehow lost the defense train at LSU. They're still good, but I don't understand how those two positions, which you never had to worry about LSU running backs. If one of them got hurt, got kicked off the team, whatever, there was just another 10-year NFL player waiting in the wings. Not the case the last couple years for the Tigers. Number 17, Arizona. Noah Fafita, Ted McMillan. Even though with the new coach in Brent Brennan, I think this team is pretty loaded talent-wise. They've got some good players. I don't think they'll have that much of a drop-off. First year in the Big 12 will be interesting, but given their quarterback and their skill players and all of that, they should be very, very, very good most of the year. Number 16, and finally, we wrap it up with this one today, the Mizzou Tigers. A lot of Tigers and Wildcats so far in this. people really need originality in their mascots. But Mizzou, Brady Cook, Luther Burden, Marcus Carroll, Theo Weasley, they've got players. They've got players all over the place at Mizzou. They've got a defense that even though Brian Baker is at LSU now, he went to another group of Tigers. Even though he is there, I think will still be very good. They've got a very interesting, unique coach in Eli Drinkwitz, who appears to me to be on the rise. I think they'll do very well, and I think this is about a fair spot. But again, this is a team that, if the ball bounces their way, could finish even higher than this, given where they finished at the end of last year, looking like a team that is ready to pounce, pun intended, because that's what Tigers do. This has been the Top 5. Smokey and Craig are wrapping